The story begins with his daughter playing on the swing. She tells her father that the teacher asked why he didn't attend the meeting. To defend herself, she explained that her father was a former god of war, but due to his injuries, he became paralyzed. Because of this, the girl is constantly bullied at school. Her mother also suffers from cruel remarks, and the daughter, powerless to help, often sees her crying secretly at night. All she wants is for Lin Feng to wake up soon. Even in his unconscious state, he notices his daughter's tears and her hopeful gaze. Suddenly, a boy her age shows up and mocks her, shouting that she's crying again. She tries to ignore it, but he spits out a disgusting rumor, saying her mother takes advantage of a crippled man. Those words enrage Rui. Without thinking twice, she jumps off the swing and charges at Zhou Xiaohu. Rui snapped, yelling at the bully that if he dared insult her parents again, he'd regret it. But Xiaohu, much bigger than her, shoved her hard to the ground. She hit her head on the swing behind her, and the boy laughed at her pain, even spitting on her. Lying there, Rui clenched the grass in her hands, trembling with rage, while he mocked her, calling her a little animal. Unable to take the insults any longer, she lunged at him and bit his hand. The bully's parents were nearby, and when his mother saw her son being attacked, she rushed over. The woman kicked Rui and screamed that she was a wild, uneducated brat. Now back on the ground, Rui glared at the woman, who was acting even worse than her son. The woman grabbed Rui, ignoring her screams, and dragged her toward Xiaohu. She threw the girl down and started yelling at her to kneel and apologize. Meanwhile, the protagonist sat in his wheelchair, feeling his internal energy boil with rage at the injustice against his daughter. Anger and the instinct to protect her surged through him as he watched. Rui couldn't understand why she should apologize to the boy who had insulted her father. At that moment, Xiaohu's father stepped in. He yanked the girl by her ponytail, forcing her to apologize. Still, Rui resisted, and the woman slapped her hard. Looking at her with pure contempt, Xiaohu's mother asked if she was sure she wouldn't apologize. Even knowing she was up against two adults, Rui stubbornly refused to bow. Then Xiaohu's father raised his hand, shouting that he would teach her a lesson. But to everyone's shock, the protagonist stopped his hand midair. Lin grabbed the man and demanded to know how he dared to touch his daughter. That day, our hero finally regained his powers and declared that from now on, anyone who laid a hand on his daughter would be beheaded. At first, Xiaohu's father felt superior, but now it was clear his life was hanging by a thread. From that moment on, Lin had no intention of letting anyone humiliate his family. He pinned the man to the ground while Xiaohu and his mother stood frozen, helpless. The woman, terrified for her husband, desperately tried to figure out how to help him. She rushed at Lin, striking him while screaming for him to release her husband. She even threatened to call the police, but Lin didn't let her finish that threat. His slap sent her flying back with brutal force. As she hit the grass, Lin coldly reminded her that she had dared to strike his daughter. Rage burned within him as he ordered them to never forget this day, for he was sparing their lives. Despite their attack on his daughter, Lin's mind drifted back to memories of his battles, fighting alone against countless soldiers. The last warrior standing was breathing heavily, his body battered and covered in abrasions. Suddenly, the protagonist heard a voice praising him, saying he could single-handedly inspire an army of 10,000. Lin snapped his gaze toward the sound, just as more warriors descended before him. They declared they wouldn't let the protagonist win so easily. One soldier stepped forward, admitting Lin was truly worthy of his title, but insisted that today he would fall at the hands of the 7 sons of the Western Alliance. Hearing their bold words, Lin smirked, raising his spear with unwavering resolve. He roared that he had fought for 6 long years and had no reason to fear them now. The leader of the Western Alliance rushed in, striking with deadly intent. Warriors surrounded Lin, their weapons flashing as they lunged to give him no chance to survive. But Lin slipped past the blade, moving like a shadow. The spear's handle still struck his body, yet he remained unshaken. With a swift counter, Lin hurled one of the Alliance members aside using the power of his spear. Behind him, the leader closed in, weapon raised, convinced this would be the final blow. But Lin acted with lightning speed. His spear pierced through the enemy's body, crimson spilling from the man's mouth as disbelief filled his eyes. Lin coldly told him he was too weak, and that even an army of 10,000 could never push him back a single step. At that moment, the 3 remaining members charged only a meter away. Lin unleashed a flurry of cuts, his voice sharp as he told them to blame themselves for their defeat. His spear moved so fast and so precise that the warriors couldn't even react. Only at the very end did they realize the inevitable. There was nothing they could do to stop his crushing blows. When the dust settled, Lin stood alone once more on the battlefield. He believed that if he could bring order to the country, peace would finally reach his home, but the battle had taken its toll. His body was battered, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Still, he couldn't afford to fall. His daughter needed a bone marrow transplant. A voice pulled him back to the present. Rei's voice, trembling as she clung to his legs, calling for her father. Joy filled Lin's heart as he held his daughter close. She stared at him, hardly believing this was truly her father. The protagonist vowed to wipe out Xiaohu's entire family if they refused to bow 100 times. The terrified family quickly obeyed, bowing over and over, apologizing with every breath. Rei cried loudly, saying everyone around them hated her father. But Lin promised her that he would never again allow anyone to harm their family. She kept crying, heartbroken that no one believed her when she said her father was a hero. He listened, but his gaze shifted when he noticed her body hadn't fully recovered. Lin was deeply worried, knowing he had to stay strong for her. The girl noticed his struggle and asked to be put down. He gently obeyed, setting her on the ground and assuring her she was fine. He stroked her head and told her to come home with him. But Rei revealed the harsh truth. Their grandmother had kicked them out and banned them from returning because her mother needed to meet with Uncle Sun. Lin frowned, sensing something suspicious. Rei leaned in and whispered for him to pretend to be asleep again. He smiled at her cleverness, agreeing with her plan. Returning to the wheelchair, he prepared to play along. Right on cue, Rei screamed that her father had reverted to this state because the Gascow family assaulted him. Turning to the frightened couple, she shouted that they would soon face her uncle, and that would be their end. She pushed her father toward the house as Xiaohei's parents trembled, thinking they were about to demand compensation. Finally, father and daughter reached the main entrance. A blonde woman stood in the hallway, scowling with disgust. She immediately insulted Rei, reminding her that she had forbidden them from bringing Lin back without her permission. Rei hid behind the wheelchair, but bravely told her grandmother that she and her father were exhausted. The woman didn't care. She snapped at the girl to shut up, and, pointing at Lin, screamed that she was never to call that cripple her father. The little girl stood her ground, insisting she would always call him father. Suddenly, Rei heard a strange male voice saying it would be an honor to spend his life with Shin. A tall man then left the house. Lin's expression darkened as his daughter whispered that this was the man her mother had mentioned when speaking to Uncle Sun. His wife, Shin, appeared, a young, beautiful woman, visibly upset. Shin said she wanted to think about the marriage proposal. Sun agreed to give her more time, but was confident he would win her over. When he turned, he saw a man and a little girl standing in the yard right in front of him. He immediately realized the girl was Shin's daughter. Sun walked over, patting her cheeks and calling her cute. At that moment, Shin's mother told her to walk Sun to the door, but the protagonist's wife refused. Rei's grandmother rushed after Sun to ask how the meeting had gone, leaving her daughter upset. Watching all this, Rei whispered to her father that this man was trying to steal Shin away from them. Just then her mother came over, and with all the tenderness in the world, took Rei's little hands. Shin thanked Rei for taking care of her father that day. The girl started crying, asking if her mother was really looking for a new father. Shin promised her that would never happen. While wiping away her daughter's tears, she noticed a mark on her face and asked if she had fought again. Rei lied, not wanting to worry her mother. After that, Shin took the protagonist and her daughter home. Once they returned, Rei was sent to her room, leaving her parents alone. Shin sat on the bed facing Lin, trying to figure out what was right to do in this situation. The protagonist wondered if his wife knew he had awakened. She softly said that she knew he couldn't hear her and wasn't conscious, but she wanted to tell him something. These words made Lin even more tense, forcing him to hide that he was awake. With tears in her eyes, Shin gently stroked her husband's hair, saying Rei was saved because he sacrificed himself. She confessed she wanted their daughter to have a strong and happy family. Through tears, she admitted she was willing to marry Sun if it meant their daughter would be treated well. It was a painful decision, but telling him made her feel honest with the man she loved most. She stood, apologized sincerely to the silent protagonist, and began to leave. Meanwhile, Lin thought about how much his wife had endured during his deep sleep. Suddenly, a loud knock came from the other side of the room. He realized he wasn't alone. Jiang, Shin's younger sister, emerged from the bathroom. She casually said Lin had no idea his wife was getting married. He didn't expect to see her there. Though he didn't react outwardly, inside he was tense. Jiang approached his wheelchair, tossed a wet towel aside, and grabbed his chin, lamenting that such a handsome man was going to waste. A melody started playing, distracting her as she lay on the bed and greeted her future brother-in-law. She answered a call, her bare feet right in front of Lin. He remembered she was still naked, but diverted his attention, focusing on the conversation. Sun asked if her sister had accepted the gifts. Zhang replied no, but added that sooner or later her sister would belong to Sun. He seemed doubtful, so he invited her to buy whatever she wanted. That was exactly what she hoped to hear. She immediately demanded a bag and a pair of shoes. Sun promised to give her everything if she did something for him. Zhang agreed, heading to her sister's closet. She said she'd do whatever he asked. After dressing in a blouse, she told her future brother-in-law to change Shin's wardrobe after they married. Then she left the room, and Lin was alone, sitting in the center, processing everything he had heard. It was hard to accept that Shin felt forced to marry this man to secure Rei's future. The window was open, curtains swaying in the light breeze. Suddenly, a girl appeared in front of his wheelchair. She bowed, saying she was glad he had finally woken up. Lin recognized her as Xiaoqing and asked if she wasn't supposed to be guarding the border. The girl, without raising her eyes, admitted that her master was now more important than guarding the border. After their last battle, no one had dared to breach it anyway. Lin listened carefully to his subordinate and asked if she had any other news for him. Qin's expression turned sad as she revealed that during the past 2 years, he had been surrounded by ill-intentioned people, especially those who wanted to take his wife away. She confessed that without his order, she couldn't act against them. Now she asked for permission to eliminate all those villains. Lin could barely contain his anger as he listened. He realized that while he had been recovering, many had already gotten too close. Yet his main concern was now Sun. He ordered Qin to gather all the information she could about him. She accepted the command without hesitation, promising to start immediately and bring him everything as soon as possible. Without making a sound, the loyal subordinate vanished through the window, disappearing as swiftly as she had appeared. Left alone once again, Lin didn't remain in silence for long. The door creaked open, and Rei came running in, her face glowing with happiness. She told her mother that, according to the fairy tale, the prince kissed Sleeping Beauty, and she woke up. Smiling innocently, Rei promised that if her mother kissed her father, he would also wake up. Shin didn't know what to say, but she looked at her daughter's pleading eyes and thought seriously about it. Leaning down, she gently explained that it was just a fairy tale, but Rei knew the truth, that her father was already awake, and she wanted her mother to discover it this way. The girl insisted, urging her mother to kiss him. Shin, though doubtful, couldn't refuse her daughter's request, and agreed. Slowly, she approached her husband and studied his face closely. Lin hadn't seen her from this distance in so long. She leaned in, pouring all her love into the kiss, clinging to the faint hope deep in her heart that he would wake up. Rei peeked through her fingers, expecting to see her father open his eyes and her mother burst with joy, but nothing happened. Lin remained still. Shin turned to her daughter with a pained look, saying that Daddy didn't wake up and that fairy tales weren't real. Crushed, Rei couldn't understand why her father didn't get up to show her mother the truth. Shin took her hand and with a trembling voice promised she would find a new father to take care of them. But this only made Rei furious. She screamed that her mother was a liar, reminding her that she had promised no one would ever replace Lin. Sobbing, Rei clutched her father's hand, desperately trying to lift him, begging him to wake up. Shin turned away, unable to watch without crying. The little girl was certain he could hear her, begging him to tell her mother that he had already recovered. Inside, Lin struggled to stay still. It broke his heart, but he mentally apologized to his daughter. He had to keep pretending, because revealing himself now would put everything at risk. But as Rei saw no reaction at all, her sobs grew louder. She yelled that he was a liar, just like her mother. Shin was forced to take her out of the room, asking her not to shout at her father. Yet Rei couldn't believe that her father would allow her mother to replace him. Time passed, and the difficult day slowly came to an end. Darkness fell over the house, with only a single room lit by a lonely lamp. Rei eventually drifted into sleep, tears still in her eyes, mumbling that everyone around her was a liar. Shin sat silently beside her daughter, guilt weighing heavily on her heart. At that moment, the door creaked open, and Jiang appeared in the doorway. She reminded her older sister about the banquet, and questioned why she was still at home. Shin didn't react. Jiang grabbed her sister's hand, insisting they had to leave immediately. She added that after marrying Sun, Rei would be able to have anything she wanted. Shin, wanting only for her daughter to stop crying herself to sleep, reluctantly agreed to go. Meanwhile, Lin remained in his room when Qin slipped back through the open window. In her hand was an envelope. She addressed him as Master, and reported that she had gathered all the information about Sun. She handed over the envelope and reminded him that today was Ginseng's birthday, with Sun hosting a banquet at the Jiangzhou Hotel where Shin would arrive in about 40 minutes. Lin took the envelope, thanked his loyal subordinate, and carefully opened it. As he read the papers, his expression hardened. He couldn't believe how vile Sun's family was in their methods. Rising from his wheelchair, he ordered Qin to prepare. They were going to the birthday party together. At the hotel, the two sisters arrived on time and were warmly welcomed by a smiling staff member who confirmed the reservation for Sun. A separate room had been arranged for them. Entering the hall, Jiang was dazzled by the lavish decorations, pointing excitedly at the huge arch with the birthday message, but Shin remained uneasy. A man adjusted his glasses and commented on how surprised he was that his father had booked the entire hotel. Jiang quickly moved closer to her future brother-in-law, laughing that he wasn't wrong. Footsteps echoed in the corridor as a little girl approached Qin, carrying a box with a beautiful ring meant for the birthday girl. Jiang's eyes sparkled when she saw the golden ring with its massive diamond, eager to admire it up close. Then Sun knelt, presenting the ring, and asked Shin to marry him. The staff whispered among themselves, impressed by how much his family had spent on the engagement. Sun promised to take care of Shin and her family, staring at her with expectation, but the weight of the decision tore her apart. Her soul felt split in two, and she stayed silent. Nearby, Lin and Chin sat near the piano, watching everything closely. Chin asked if she should intervene and remove that arrogant man, but Lin told her to wait, his worry growing as he watched his wife. Finally, Shin pulled her hand back from Sun, saying the proposal was too sudden. She confessed she worried about who would care for Lin. Jiang panicked, urging her sister to accept. Hearing her hesitation again, Sun's patience ran out. He stood, reproaching her for being ungrateful after everything he had done, renting an entire hotel and promising to take care of her daughter. Jiang joined in, pressuring her sister to marry the wealthy, powerful man. But Shin's anger flared. How dare Sun reproach her? She refused his proposal. Enraged by her rejection, Sun reached for her arm. Shin tried to run, but he threatened that if she didn't obey, her family would cease to exist. He whispered that she should be obedient if she wanted her daughter to be safe, then arrogantly announced that today would be her wedding day. Guests began to cheer for him, praising his power. The protagonist had seen enough. Lin, still observing, told Chin that she would know what to do. In a blink, the girl was behind Sun. As Sun approached Shin, Chin seized his hand, forcing him to face her. Furious, she ordered him to stop. The guards rushed to his aid, but Sun, wearing a confident smile, waved them back and ordered everyone to leave. The arrogant man thought Chin had stopped him out of jealousy, believing she was envious of his fiancée. With a smirk, he stroked her cheek and mockingly asked if she also wanted to be hugged. The guards watching laughed, calling Sun talented, but Chin had reached her limit. In an instant, she struck his face so hard that his glasses shattered. Sun froze, stunned, clutching his cheek in disbelief. Then his rage erupted. He ordered his guards to finish her off. The men charged at her, yelling that she had no idea what she had gotten herself into. Yet their confidence vanished the moment Chin calmly raised her hand and with just a slight movement, sent the first attacker flying. Without breaking a sweat, she effortlessly neutralized 3 more guards, leaving them sprawled on the floor. The remaining guards stared at his fallen comrades, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Sun, now furious, roared that he was the heir, and this was his family's territory. Chin looked at him with cold disdain, stating that sons of influential families should learn to behave more modestly. At that moment, a woman nearby commented she was curious to know who this girl really was. Soon after, Chin calmly wished the woman a happy birthday, surprising her. Suddenly, a beautiful melody filled the hotel. A voice shouted for everyone to look at the stage. The sisters turned their heads, stunned, as they saw a handsome man sitting at the piano, playing a breathtaking tune. Jiang couldn't take her eyes off him, shouting how handsome he was. But Chin recognized him immediately. It was her husband. She confirmed to herself that the man on stage was her master. The other woman was confused, not understanding why Chin called him that. Sun's anger boiled over when he saw someone else had entered the hotel he believed his family owned. He shouted for the manager. The staff rushed to his side, and the manager ordered the guards to handle the situation. Moments later, a large group of hotel security appeared. Sun grinned, confident that Chin would finally pay for hitting him. He pointed at her and barked the order to throw her out. But instead of obeying, the guards turned on Sun himself. To his shock, they grabbed him and began dragging him out. He screamed, struggling, shouting that he was Sun. The hotel employee gave him a cold smile and explained there had been no mistake. The entire hotel was rented by Lin. At first, Sun tried to keep his arrogance, but as reality hit, panic set in. The manager apologized to Chin for the incident, then ordered his staff to remove Sun and his men. They were thrown out of the hall despite his protests. Over the radio, the manager instructed that the entire Sun family was now banned from ever entering the hotel again. Meanwhile, all attention turned back to the man at the piano. Chin couldn't take her eyes off him, filled with a storm of emotions. Could it really be her husband? Jiang, mesmerized by the wealthy, handsome man her sister seemed to know, excitedly asked Chin to introduce him, but Chin simply said she didn't know him, still hiding the truth. The guests were enchanted by the unique melody played by Lin. Then, the sound of explosions outside drew their attention. Someone shouted for everyone to look at the sky. When they lifted their heads, they gasped. The night sky was ablaze with fireworks, and at the center of the fiery display was an inscription congratulating the birthday girl. Chin was stunned by such a romantic gesture. Hearing Lin's name announced with admiration stirred even deeper emotions within her. A sudden urge welled up inside her. She needed to confirm with her own eyes if the man at the piano was truly her husband. Chin turned sharply and ran toward the piano, desperate to reach him, but her younger sister grabbed her hand, trying to stop her. Chin broke free and sprinted with full confidence that Lin was still waiting for her. Yet when she arrived, the room was empty. The piano stood silent. Her heart sank as she tried to understand why he had left. From behind, her sister calmly said that Lin had already gone home. Hearing those words, Chin believed it. If he was home, she needed to return as well. In reality, Lin had indeed he'd left the hotel earlier and was already back in their room before his wife arrived. He ordered Chin to gather all information about the Jian family and deliver it to him. She apologized for speaking so boldly, but said no one needed to know about his awakening. She could handle the matter personally. The protagonist smiled and asked if she was truly worried about the consequences of someone discovering he had woken up. Standing by the window, Chin avoided answering. Suddenly, she saw Shin entering the house. She bowed, said goodbye to her master, and confirmed she would carry out his orders. Lin changed back into his old clothes, determined to keep his awakening a secret a little longer. He hated hiding it from his wife, but he had no choice. As Shin entered, she ignored her mother's questions about the birthday celebration. Behind her, the woman shouted that nothing had changed in the room, and the cripple was still there. Jiang followed, smugly telling their mother that Shin had been very successful tonight. She even showed a recording of the man who rented the entire Jiangzhou hotel, proudly announcing that this rich man named Lin had done it all for Shin. Their mother scoffed, saying that now that Shin had found a wealthier man, she no longer needed to marry Sun. But Shin ignored her and opened the door to her room. With tears in her eyes, she softly called Lin, hoping he would wake up. Her heart broke when she saw him sitting motionless in his wheelchair. She was sure she had seen him at the hotel, but now all her confidence crumbled. Crying, she remembered how 5 years ago her family had forced her to marry Sun, a man she despised. She had been overjoyed when her grandfather introduced her to the protagonist instead. That night, they were married, and soon after, Ray was born, a ray of hope in their harsh world. But then Ray fell ill, needing a bone marrow transplant. Lin had saved her, sacrificing his own health in the process. Tears streamed down Shin's face as she thought of it all. Her daughter had been saved, but her husband had been left broken. Kneeling in front of him, she begged him to come back to her, saying she couldn't live like this any longer. Lin looked at his wife, his heart exploding with pain. Silently, he promised her she wouldn't have to wait much longer. Meanwhile, Jiang watched coldly, saying she couldn't understand what her sister saw in this vegetable who depended on everyone. Then she remembered the rich man named Lin. Smirking, she entered the room and tried to lure Shin out, suggesting they go to a bar. Shin refused, saying she needed to sleep because she had to take Ray to school the next day, and they could go out another time. But Jiang was persistent, insisting they needed to relax. Earlier after the incident, Sun had called Jiang, demanding she fulfill her part of their agreement. At first, she didn't want to, but he promised that he could make this mysterious Mr. Lin her husband. Believing his lie, Jiang agreed to bring her sister to the bar that night. Now, she hugged Shin, cheering loudly that she was the best sister in the world, while secretly pushing forward her own plan. Shin, exhausted, finally gave in and went to fix her makeup, unaware of her sister's hidden motives. Chin headed for the exit, and Jiang looked at the protagonist with an evil smile. Then she leaned towards Lin and told him that after today, his sister would finally get divorced. After that, she also left. Suddenly, the protagonist was alone in the room, and Chin appeared through the bedroom window. She reported that she had discovered all the latest cases of the Jiang's family. This is the family of Lin's wife. Chin began to tell that there was a financial crisis in her company, and Chin's family promised to take them to the top if Chin married her son. At that moment, Lin frowned and said that that son is very calculating, and now they will see if Chin is faster than his blade. After that, the hero saw his wife's cart leave the house and ordered Chin to monitor Chin's movements. Meanwhile, at the love bar, Chin was sitting and the waiters noticed that the man looked cheerful. They filled his glass with drink and asked if he had any good news. The man laughed uncontrollably and said he had great news, and the people around him congratulated him on it. Soon the Zhang sisters entered the bar. Chin asked if they had already come to the right place. The men looked at the girls and noticed how beautiful they were. Sun smiled happily and started walking towards the girls. At that moment, Chin says she wasn't there to see him and demanded an explanation of why he was there. His younger sister tried desperately to calm things down. Then Chin realized that his sister had teamed up with this man to lure her to the bar. Sun tried to convince her to stay, so he bowed to the girl and admitted that he acted rashly, so he apologizes and would like to talk to her about it. The protagonist's wife mentally admitted that her family still needed Sun, so she couldn't destroy this relationship like that. Sun in turn promised that it wouldn't happen again, but the guy mentally says that he was waiting for the moment when he would drag the girl to the bed. So he goes to the counter and takes a glass, then started to pour wine and took advantage of the fact that Chin's attention was diverted to throw a pill into the glass. Then Sun soon asked the girl to accept a glass of wine as an apology, but Chin replied that he would not accept it because he was driving. However, his sister suggested that the girl drink at least a little to prove that she had forgiven the man. Zhang grabbed the girl and said that nothing would happen. Then Chin accepted the glass. Then she drank it all in one gulp. Zhang smiled and said that now Sun must believe in his sister's sincerity. Sun was very happy and was already anxious to know how he would take possession of the girl. A few moments later, the protagonist's wife felt bad, so she tried to tell her sister that they needed to go back, but the arrogant guy pushed her away and stood next to her. After that, he took the girl in his arms. Chin tried to resist. Although there were many people in the bar, everyone was smiling. In addition, his sister saw what was happening, and even then, he didn't try to help her. Suddenly, Chin reported that Chin had been captured, so Lin ordered her subordinate to find out immediately immediately which hotel she was in. A second later, he was told that she was in the Grand Milky Way Hotel. The protagonist was furious and ordered Chin to inspect the situation, but he wanted to deal with the main problem himself. Sun took the girl to a hotel that was not far from the bar. Chin said she didn't understand what was happening. She was trying to understand where they were and what the man was going to do to her. Chin wanted to go home, but Sun didn't listen to her and tried to convince the girl that she had drunk too much and knew what they were doing in the hotel. Sun grabbed his victim by the chin and told her that they would sleep together today. The girl wouldn't give up so easily and pushed the man away from her. Soon, a crazy smile appeared on Sun's face as he said that he didn't expect the victim to have the strength to resist. He began to speak perverted words to the girl. Then Sun took the girl by the hand and said that she couldn't escape because there were too many of his people around. The protagonist's wife felt disgusted and tried to fight him. The girl understood that she needed to resist with all her strength. At the opportunity, she bit the man on the ear. This annoyed him, and he pulled the girl by the hair, then shouted that if she continued, she would meet a terrible end. Sun strangled the girl, saying that she was to blame for not wanting to marry him. Chin at that moment could only think about her husband. Suddenly, the protagonist appeared at the door of the room. Sun did not recognize the man and shouted that he entered the wrong place. The hero was intimidating only with his appearance and promised Sun that he would send his entire family to the cemetery if he touched in again. The girl couldn't believe her husband was in front of her. Sun quickly received a punch from Lin in the face and flew to the ground. Sun carefully examined the unexpected guest and tried to understand how a guy in a wheelchair could come here, but he continued to sit on the ground and decided to admit defeat. Now, in addition to the abrasion on his cheek, Sun also had a black eye on his face. He was sure that the two of them were conspiring against him. This absurd assumption angered the protagonist. Suddenly, Sun stood up with trembling legs and assured that he would be rescued now. For some reason, the man felt superior and began to say that such a cripple would never deal with someone like him. The man threatened Lin, saying that he would harm his wife and daughter if he dared to touch him. The protagonist couldn't stand it and asked what kind of nonsense he was talking about. Lin decided that this time he would limit himself to just a warning. At that moment, Sun took out his phone and promised that he would soon find out which one was the true non-entity. Sun's hand was immediately intercepted. Then Lin asked if this was the hand he touched Chin with. Lin started to twist the guy's arm, and he felt terrible pain and said that his family would not let his end pass so easily. In response to this statement, the protagonist hit him. The man fell to his knees, and Lin expressed that he didn't care about his influential family. Then the protagonist walked away and promised that if the guy caused trouble again, he would have no mercy. At that moment, Chin felt her eyelids getting heavy, and it was difficult to stay conscious. The husband approached her and took off his jacket to cover her. Lin promised that now he was around and everything would be fine. But these words couldn't calm her down completely, so she reminded him that he would go to prison for murder. Sun began to rejoice at the girl's words. He felt confident again and began to tease Lin. The protagonist approached again and said that in his eyes, Sun was not a person, then again pushed him to the ground. Sun began to beg for mercy, but the protagonist replied that he would not destroy him for now, as he still has some use. After that, Lin took her foot off the man. His whole body trembled as he asked what Lin wanted. The hero looked at the man who dared to bring his wife against her will to a hotel room. Then he said that he would now teach Sun a lesson. The man tried to convince Lin to retreat, but the proto's foot stepped on the man's most vulnerable point, causing him to scream in pain. After that, the protagonist felt that his duty had been fulfilled and could leave Sun writhing on the ground. Then he took his wife in his arms, and she regained consciousness. The girl looked at Lin and was happy that he saved her. Chin was very afraid that in the end, this was just a dream, but the husband promised that it was not a dream and apologized for being late. Then he soon kissed the girl, then called Chin, saying that he would take his wife home to be examined by a doctor. Chin smiled happily. In just 2 years, the world forgot about Supreme Lin after the accident, but now he has recovered and started to show his comeback by destroying Sun's family. After some time, Lin entered the room and saw that her daughter was still sleeping. He leans on the mattress and the girl felt a man's hands. Then she woke up. Suddenly, Rui saw her father and hugged him, crying. She admitted that she was very afraid of not seeing him again. The girl was worried about her father's health, but the man convinced her that he was just tired and that it was time for them to sleep. Her mother would come back a little later. The man was about to go to the bedroom when the girl grabbed his hand. Rui looked upset and was tormented by the question if her father would leave during the night because he had already lied to her. Then the protagonist confessed to the little girl that his plans had changed, and now under no circumstances should she tell that he woke up. Rui promised that she wouldn't even tell her mother, so she and her father swore to keep the secret. Meanwhile, a doctor from a hospital was carefully reviewing the exams of one of the patients. She arrived at Sun's room and said that the only way out for him was surgery, but the risks to his life were too high. The young heir believed that his days were numbered. Suddenly, the doctor said that his only option was amputation. This terrible news made the guy scream all over the hospital, promising to make Lin pay for it. Meanwhile, Shin was sleeping peacefully in his room. His daughter was patiently waiting for her. At that moment, Shin opened her eyes and realized that she was in the room. Then she heard Rui's voice, and her head automatically became dizzy. Her daughter laughed happily and said that her mother was a real sleeper. At that moment, Shin remembered the events of last night and immediately looked at her husband. Then she saw him in the wheelchair as always. Then she started to cry because she believed that everything was just a dream, and who saved her was another man. Rui took his mother's face in his little hands and asked her not to cry because her father would definitely protect them. Suddenly, Shin's mother entered the room demanding an explanation from her daughter about who gave her the pill. Shin hugged her daughter and said that Shin put something in her wine, but someone managed to save her. The woman turned around and was ready to deal with the one who dared to invade her daughter's honor, but stopped abruptly and asked if Shin was really talking about Shin. The protagonist's wife was 100% sure of the man's guilt. Then she confirmed her words, but her sister went against her and replied that this was all a misunderstanding. It was also useless for Shin to do this, since Shin was going to marry him. Shin wanted to protect Shin because she was the one who took her sister to that bar, and no one could find out. At that moment, their mother says that Shin must be mistaken then. Rui got very angry, shouted to his grandmother that the mother never lies. The old woman threatened the child with her fist, and reminded her that she should be quiet when adults speak. The protagonist was very angry, but still could not expose himself. At that moment, the woman's phone rang and she felt a small wave of fear. Shin himself called her, and she didn't know what to do. The woman picked up the phone and answered. Shin said that Shin should meet him at his house, or else everyone in the Jian's family would disappear. The conversation ended there. Shin's mother begged her to admit the mistake and apologize to save the family. The girl was very upset with the family's attitude, but was forced to accept it. Rui did not like the fact that her mother was forced to apologize to the aggressor. She thought it was unfair. After some time, Lin and Rui were alone. The girl asked her father to tell her mother that he was fine. The protagonist asked her daughter to push him to the park because he will fight the bandits and teach a lesson so that mom is not scolded by grandma. That was the main objective. Rui was very happy about it, and the protagonist reminded her that it would still remain a secret. Meanwhile, Shin's father observes his son's state. His wife cried, saying that she couldn't allow anyone to do this to her only son. The man got angry and replied that crying doesn't help at all, especially since he believed that the woman had spoiled her son too much. He believed that Shin had grown up to be trash and was ruining the family's reputation because of a woman. Shin tried to convince his father that he had been ambushed. The man was furious at these words of his son and believed that he was an incompetent. The woman believed that her son was right, and the Jin's family was planning something against them. The father walked to the window and said that his assumptions were unfounded because the Jin's family was small compared to him, and the man did not consider them dangerous, even though there was someone behind them, but he considered it necessary to interrogate Shin. Shin continued to insist that he was beaten by the cripple of Shin's husband. The father promised that if he finds him, he will tear off his legs and his arms. The conversation between the family members was interrupted. The protagonist appeared in his house, and an overwhelming and oppressive aura emanated from him. The hero asked how much trouble they had caused that he needed to hire so many guard dogs. The woman quickly hid behind her husband, and he asked who Lin was and why he went to their house. Shin soon got up from the bed and shouted that it was the same Lin who assaulted him. The father saw that the protagonist dared to break into his house and said that he had a lot of courage. The hero looked at all the people in this room with disdain in his eyes and considered that they were not worthy of his wife's apology. Shin's father raised his hand and ordered his men to immediately seize the insolent man. However, Lin said with a satisfied smile that his people were not able to stand up, but he could give him time to call the others. The man was furious and promised that he would not get away with all this. He tells the protagonist that he has one last chance to try to save his life. Lin was only annoyed by such regrettable threats and asked the man if he was so sure of his words. Then the protagonist crossed the room and ended up behind the man who dared to threaten him. Soon Lin hit the head of the family in the face and he fell to the floor. The protagonist quickly explained that he could get away with anything. The woman watched all this and panicked like her husband. She even wanted to shout something at him, but he was silent and covered his mouth with his hand as soon as Lin looked in his direction. The man tried to get up from the ground while saying that he didn't care who was behind Lin because he would eliminate everyone. The protagonist appeared in front of the man and said that he was as trash as his son. Son watched his father's opponent in fear and thought with horror that the guy didn't look like a human. Lin emitted a demonic aura that made his opponents tremble in fear. The hero lifted the old man by the throat and heard screams begging for mercy. The woman threw herself at Lin's feet and promised to pay any amount. Sun also realized that without his father, the company would end, so he started begging him to let him go, promising not to bother Shin. Lin says that all his persuasion to resolve the conflict peacefully sounded simply ridiculous. Then he threw the man aside. The father found himself on the floor trying to clear his throat while his wife was worried. At that moment, Lin gave the family a day to offer their sincere apologies to Yin's, otherwise his family would disappear. He also ordered them not to tell anyone that they had seen him, because in this case, they would also disappear. The father heard the boy's conditions and felt a wave of anxiety from his last words. The office door closed and the family was left alone again. The head of the family felt humiliated and was not going to let Lin get away with it. These feelings made him furious, and he wanted to find people to end the Jian's family as soon as possible. He got up from the ground and started making all the necessary calls, while his wife checked the hallway of their house. But instead of giving orders, the old man was forced to hear that there was bad news for him. It turns out that all investors stopped cooperating with money, and banks stopped issuing loans. The phone fell out of the old man's hands, and he didn't understand how his company with hundreds of millions could fail in just one day. Sun was wrapped in a blanket and tried to ask his father what they should do now. But the man was very involved in thoughts about Lin's origins and how he could do such a thing. Sun also didn't understand how this was possible since the Jian's family needed his money. At that moment, the father threw the blanket away and shouted that his corporations were his life's work, so Sun should take the money and run to apologize to Shin. Sun didn't fully believe that his own father was forcing him to apologize. The man was so furious that he started shaking Sun and shouting that if the girl didn't forgive him, he would destroy him. Meanwhile, Shin's mother came out of the house and ordered her to agree to all of Sun's family's demands, otherwise they would be screwed. Shin didn't feel strong enough to argue with his mother, so he obediently agreed with her. They walked towards the gate while the woman wanted Shin to put on a more benevolent expression, but they didn't have time to leave because outside the gate was the young master's son. He was sitting on his knees. Shin's mother tried to lift the guy to his knees and convince him that it was her own daughter's fault. But Sun threw Lee's hand and started shouting that yesterday's situation was just his fault and begged her to forgive him. Shin began to think that this was some kind of trap. The boy took the girl's skirt and begged for forgiveness, promising that he would never bother her again. The protagonist's wife felt disgusted and said that she would only forgive the guy if he never bothered her again. Sun began to cry with happiness and swore that he would not bother her. This reaction surprised her, and she did not find out what caused her words. In addition to verbal apologies, the boy gave a check for 1 million as moral compensation. Lee wasted no time and immediately took the check. While Shin only said he didn't want to see the man again, Sun quickly left. Lee tried to find out from his daughter who helped her deal with a family as influential as Sun's, but the girl had no answers to her mother's questions. The woman thought about it and came to the conclusion that they were helped by yesterday's savior, who proved to be quite influential. Sun ran away from the Jian's family home and hoped that everything would be fine now and he would correct the situation. However, he came across Lin and her young daughter. The protagonist looked at Sun with a menacing look. The young man reported that Shin accepted his apology and asked if there would be any more orders. Lin just said that she hoped they would never meet again. The guy was about to leave when Lin's voice made him stop. The protagonist just wanted to remind him that if he told others about him, his whole family would be destroyed. Out of fear, Sun fell to his knees and shouted that he would definitely keep Lin a secret. Meanwhile, Shin's mother kept saying that she better divorce that loser because there are a lot of good men out there, so there's no reason for her to keep this useless husband. She tried to manipulate the girl and pressured her to think about her feelings. At this time, Ray returned home with his father and found his mother. Shin was surprised when she saw her daughter and Lin. Ray replied that she took her father to sunbath. The protagonist's wife immediately began to hug her daughter. She praised the girl and said how smart he was, but the old woman did not support her daughter's joy and made a disdainful sound in her direction. The girl leaned over to her mother and whispered that her father had dealt with the bad uncles, but that was just their secret. Shin looked at her daughter shocked by her words, but right after she laughed and promised to take her alone to school. After some time, Ray got ready to go to school and saw his father before leaving to see if he was okay. Lin observed his family and felt happy to be involved in their lives even in this state. As soon as the girls left, King entered. A second later, the main character asked the woman to take him out of the house because he wanted to see his daughter go to school. After some time, we see Ray. She tells her mother that she wanted her father to pick her up from school. Shin promised a reward for good behavior. At that moment, Xiaohu's family stood at the school gate. The family members smugly blocked the passage. Shin hugged her daughter closely and prepared to defend herself. She asked why they were here. The man pointed to his own forehead and blamed Lin for her injury. Then he promised that this time they would not come out so easily. The woman wanted to receive 200,000 for moral damages. Then she held Xiaohu, took her child, and said that the child did not eat and lost weight in the last 2 days out of fear. Xiaohu's father had no intention of backing down. Shin quickly replies that this is impossible. Because Lin is in a wheelchair, the man approached and started shouting that she could believe him or not, but he would finish off her ex. Ray approached and shouted that if continued, she would call her father. At that moment, the man felt Lin's frightening aura again and decided that he didn't want to be beaten again, so he took his family and ran away. His wife didn't understand why they were running away if the man had promised to deal with the disabled guy, but the head of the family had a bad feeling, and the protagonist told himself that he would have another chance in the future. At that moment, Shin leaned over to his daughter and explained that she needed to go. Soon, Princess Principal Yang appeared next to the school gate and said that she needed to talk to Shin. She didn't know what he had to talk about. Yang suggested going to the office and discussing everything there. The girl thought that this had to do with her daughter. They finally arrived at the office. Then Yang informed him that Rei's academic contract was ending this year, and the plans for next year needed to be discussed. Shin didn't understand how this could happen if they agreed that it would be 2 years, but only 6 months had passed. The director hesitated and started talking about the limited number of seats and the lack of reservations, but Shin reminded the man that she had paid him $50,000 when they closed the deal. The man sat down and explained that $50,000 was an advance payment for admission. This annoyed Shin a lot since she paid this money for the first year of study, but the director only laughed. He believed that she had fallen for his trick. Then Yang began to talk that he could help get a place in the school. The first would be to pay him $1 million and added that his commission will be added to this amount. The man understood that this option would not work for the girl because he knew that she did not have that kind of money. Shin was ready to listen to the second option. Yang put her feet on the table and said that she had heard about her husband's condition and hoped that he didn't need to explain the details of the second method. Shin was furious at the principal's words. She slammed her hands on the table and called him disgusting. Yang adjusted her glasses and said that her daughter would not be able to attend the preparatory school on her terms. Shin would not fall for this man's schemes and decided that he would send his daughter to another school. Yang was annoyed and said that none of the prep schools in the city would accept his daughter without his permission. So Yang shouted that the girl would come back tomorrow and beg. Meanwhile, Ching told the protagonist that this school has a good environment and Shin paid a lot of money so that his daughter could study here. Suddenly, one thing caught his attention. Ching turned Lin to the exit of the school and he saw his wife running away in tears. He immediately realized that something had not gone according to plan in the principal's room and decided to take a look on his own. At that moment, Ai Xiaohu's father appeared in front of the principal. Yang got nervous and on his face. He tried to pretend that he was very happy to see this family, but in fact, the man just didn't want to ruin the relationship with Ju. Because he is one of the richest in the place, they quickly expressed that they wanted to expel a little girl from school. The principal realized that they were talking about Rui and said so at the end of the semester, she would no longer attend school. However, the family was not happy with this decision, and Ju promised to pay $1 million if the girl left immediately. The principal promised to solve the problem as soon as possible and was happy that he could make a fortune so easily. At that moment, the door of the board opened with a loud bang. Everyone immediately looked at Lin. The director didn't understand who he was dealing with and tried to show his power. The mere appearance of Lin made the couple tremble with fear because they already knew him. But Yang didn't pay attention to the situation and tried to find out what this man was doing here. Joe received another severe slap in the face, and his wife was sure that now they would go base. The director was starting to get nervous but still tried to send Lin away. He was unsuccessful and was really scared when Lin promised to cut out his tongue if he spoke one more word. After that, the protagonist returned to the confrontation with Joe and asked why he stopped swearing. Our hero pinned the man's hands to the ground and informed him that if he dared to touch his wife, he could say goodbye to her hands. Lin also gave a significant look at the woman, and she realized that she was also in trouble, so the woman knelt down and said that they had accepted the mistake. Lin agreed to let the family go only if they left town today. The director didn't understand why Lin had so much power. The family accepted it and ran away soon after. After that, the protagonist sat on the couch and said he was giving the director the opportunity to explain why he was focusing on his daughter. Only after these words did the director realize that the man in his office was Rei's father, but for some reason the director thought he could threaten Lin. He then tried to intimidate him and said that he would only leave his daughter in this institution if his wife slept with him. Lin felt the anger start to boil and immediately got up from the couch, then kicked the man, breaking his glasses. Yang was lying on the floor and holding his cheek. His whole body was shaking, and he couldn't believe what had just happened. Then he took out his phone and shouted in anger that he would make Lin pay for what he had done. But the man didn't have time to call anyone because someone else broke into the office. The director ran in the hope that someone could help deal with the guy, but his boss's face expressed only anger. The school owner found out what the principal did and asked how he could use his power for personal gain. The boss added that he knew what he said to Lin's wife. Yang couldn't believe he was being fired. The boss didn't want to be beaten because of a mistake by his subordinates and fired the principal. He also ordered Yang to leave the city. The headmaster felt defeated and didn't understand how a vegetable could ruin his life. The boss pushed the former headmaster and ordered him to immediately apologize to the master, otherwise he would have a bad end. The boss also apologized to Lin and promised to immediately correct the situation, but this did not impress the protagonist as he was able to deal with his own problems. The boss realized that the former director was still silent and said that he would not save him. Yang then began to actively apologize. The hero leaned over and said that Yang was very mistaken, thinking that he could manipulate people with the help of wealth wealth and power, but from now on he will have no money or home. The only thing he can do is beg. The boss agreed that this was a deserved punishment and promised Lin that his daughter would receive a better education. The man was very happy that the mayor managed to call in time and managed to save his life. Lin decided not to interfere anymore and asked everyone present to keep his appearance a secret. The men promised to remain silent, but this incident made it clear that someone upstairs already knew about his awakening. Meanwhile, Shin walked through the park, thinking that today all the problems fell on her head. At that moment, the younger sister appeared next to her, asking if the girl was going to the company. Shin shared her problem about having to pay $1 million for in school. The younger sister was sure that it was due to lack of status and mentioned son, but this made the protagonist's wife furious. She walked away from her sister and said that from that day on, they would break all ties with this family. At that moment, Jung said that she heard from her mother about her mysterious boyfriend and suggested asking him for help, but Shin asked her not to talk nonsense. Jiang believes that his sister is stupid, mainly because she wants to continue with a man who doesn't move instead of finding someone influential. After the brief conversation, Jiang left, leaving her sister to deal with her problems alone. After some time, Jiang went to a nearby cafe with Sun. The girl saw his condition and thought he was sick. Sun got angry and thought that Jiang could harm him. Jiang didn't understand why the guy was angry at her. She says that she just wanted to remind him that he shouldn't be left behind if he wanted to get his sister. Sun smiled and said that the girl really wants to take him to the grave. The younger sister remembered that the man had competition and that she considered him the best candidate. After these words, Sun thanked him, and at the same time he looked very scary. Jiang decided that she no longer needed to be by his side, and said that since he had given up, she was leaving. Sun saw the girl leave and called her friends, saying that there was a good job for them. At that moment, Jiang walked down the street and thought it was surprising how quickly the young heir would give up. The girl was very upset when she realized that she would not receive her bag. Suddenly, 2 guys were following her, but the blonde did not pay much attention. The boys looked at the girl carefully and thanked Sun for the work. They promised that they would have a lot of fun using Jiang. After that, they appeared in front of the girl laughing and asking if she was walking here alone. Jiang was scared and couldn't understand what these 2 men wanted with her. The guys examined her body and laughed, saying that they wanted her body. At that moment, King asked the protagonist if she should save the girl, but he decided to teach Jiang the lesson first. Lin knew that the blonde was ready for anything for money, but even so, she was his wife's family, so he would see if she really needed his help. Meanwhile, the boys took the girl to an alley, and she begged to be released, promising to pay any money. But Sun had already paid for the work, and they didn't want to waste such an amazing opportunity to have fun. Jiang heard Sun's name and didn't understand why the one she helped would want to harm her. Then the girl screamed, trying to escape, but her loud screams only made the guys happy. The girl had her clothes torn and the boys could see. Jiang cried and begged for help. At this moment, Qing, as an excellent warrior, was able to neutralize the white-haired guy with one blow, and then just as easily knocked out her partner. Jiang was sitting on the ground, covering her body. Chang looked at the girl she saved and said not to thank her. She ordered Jiang not to interfere in her older sister's affairs, otherwise she wouldn't come anymore, to help. After these words, the girl left the alley and left Jiang alone. The girl was still crying and thought seriously why this woman called her sister ma'am, and especially who was the master who sent her. Jiang covered her body and felt guilty for forcing her sister to stay with Sun. Meanwhile, Qing was once again by the protagonist's side. They hoped the girl had learned. Qing agreed. Then she told the protagonist that soon she will have the Benhai feast, but Lin denied that she would. At this moment, a guard went to the Sun and informed him that 2 of his men had been eliminated. Lin was very surprised when he realized that the 2 of them had failed the task. The guy wouldn't stop because of a failure and promised himself that Jiang's end was just beginning. The guy saw a great way to deal with Jiang and called his good friend Liu. A lot of time had passed and Benhai's celebration was approaching. At that moment, Sun appeared at Qing's house again. The man assured that he came only with good intentions. Qing's mother didn't notice the strange prank and happily supported the man's words. Sun asked if the girls knew about Benhai's celebration that would take place in 2 weeks. The mother immediately got excited because this celebration was a very important event and the woman hoped that he would take them. Sun replied that his family was not invited, so it was impossible to take her, but he promised to introduce a friend who could take them. Lin's wife did not want to hear more, so she got up from her seat and said she was not interested. Li didn't let his daughter leave and grabbed her with force, asking her to take advantage of such a good opportunity. While the woman tried to convince her daughter, the guy thought that he himself would go to the celebration if Jiang agreed, so he would take the sisters. Suddenly Rui appeared along with his father. Sun didn't expect that this demon would come back so soon, so he was very nervous. At that moment, Sun bowed to the girls and asked them to inform them about the decision as soon as possible. Li believed that it was Jiang's responsibility to accept the invitation. Jiang said after the recent incident was in no hurry to trust Sun so willingly. She came down and told her mother about it, but Li was furious because she was sure that the young master would never do that. Jiang didn't argue, but doubt settled in her soul that the criminals would attack her again. At this moment, Yixin says that yesterday day, her grandfather called her and ordered the girl to go to the main house. Lai was not very happy with this prospect, and she did not understand why the man needed her daughter. Sun replies that she did not know the details, but she felt that it was necessary to leave as soon as possible. The main house of the Jiang's family was much larger than the country house. The grandfather sat at the head of the table and said disgruntled that the family had not received an invitation to the celebration. The guy noticed that although their business has improved this year, the influential family still do not pay attention to them. The blonde man looked at Sun and hinted that someone could help them attract attention. The girl was very surprised when she realized that even this part of her family depended on her. The grandfather did not worry much about Sun in the last few years, but he reminded her that he always provided money when needed. The old man crossed his hands in front of him and said that he needed the girl to do him a favor. She believed that her grandfather was joking because she honestly didn't understand what she could do. The blonde man asked disdainfully if she didn't want to help the family. The cousin says that the girl pretended not to understand. Sun believed that she couldn't solve a problem that the head of the family couldn't handle. However, the old man explained that an influential person was interested in her and could help them get to the party. Sun felt a growing anxiety and said that no one could be interested in her since she already had a child. The cousin smiled sarcastically and added that the girl should thank her for the opportunity. The uncle also decided to play with it. The protagonist's wife jumped out of her seat and told everyone that she was a married woman, not a toy, but her words had no effect, and the uncle said that it was better to be a toy than to serve a vegetable. Sin tried to defend her husband's honor. The grandfather knocked on the table and promised that if his granddaughter complied with the request, the family would never forget. But the protagonist's wife would not agree. She says she won't allow her to lose her dignity and won't use my body. Shin says she will honor her husband, and if someone wants to go ahead with this plan, then they can go alone. Shin didn't understand how someone could ask for something like that. The old man didn't take no for an answer. At that moment, the cousin began to pressure the girl about the consequences of her actions. But the protagonist's wife remained firm, believing that only she had the right to decide what to do with her body. Suddenly, the cousin began to threaten Shin, saying that something could happen to her husband. It seemed that this girl was jealous of Shin's beauty, and she kept asking what people saw in her. She took the opportunity to push Shin on the table, then threw her to the ground. At this point, the cousin shouted that this was her last chance for Shin to make the right decision, and added that the lives of her loved ones would depend on it. Although it was painful for the protagonist's wife, she agreed to give up her principles for the sake of her daughter's and husband's safety. The grandfather waved his hand in her direction, and promised to save his family's life if the girl received an invitation to the celebration. The frustrated girl left the main house of the Jeans family. After some time, Sin returned home and immediately went to the park with her husband. The girl was sitting on a swing and decided to tell her husband what her grandfather had said. Sin told Lin that someone influential was interested in her, and she knew that she was obliged to entertain him if she did not want to bring problems to the protagonist and his daughter. The girl unfortunately said that she would have to get a ticket because otherwise they would destroy her family. The blonde hugged her husband, saying that she did not want to cheat on him, but she knew that she was not ready to lose them. So she apologized to Lin because that was the only way she could protect them. The protagonist was furious with his treatment of his wife, and his hands were illuminated with blue fire. Then Lin put his wife to sleep and sat her on the chair. The protagonist promised that he would catch everyone who dared to intimidate his wife. After that king instantly appeared nearby, she bowed and was ready to carry out any request. Lin decided that she would not hide anymore, that she woke up and ordered Ching to inform everyone about her presence at the Binhai celebration. Meanwhile, Egg Sin's mother was confused when she saw her father at her house. At that moment, the cousin introduced a guy named Liu Xiao. The guy sat next to Li and started smoothing her hair while she tried to understand what was happening. At that moment, the grandfather asked her to call Sin soon because they couldn't leave a person as influential as Liu waiting. Li explained that the daughter took Ray to school, then decided to ask why they were there. The cousin reported that Liu Xiao liked Egg Sin, so if the girl didn't bring trouble, the Jian's family wouldn't need anything else. Li was very happy. The cousin contemptuously told him that it was all thanks to her grandfather's efforts. After a few minutes, the sisters returned home. Liu Xiao began to look at the girls' bodies and praised Ku Xinyan's choice. Jiang's joy diminished when she saw her grandfather, who had previously promised that he would leave them alone. The grandfather introduced Liu and said he was the one Shin should accompany. The man cleared his throat and said he was looking forward to their new meeting. Li approached the eldest daughter and ordered her not to waste this great opportunity. The grandfather was dissatisfied with his granddaughter's behavior because she didn't greet the guest, but Liu didn't consider it something terrible and added, "That shyness on the first date is completely normal." The guy decided to introduce himself first and started to say which company he owned, but Sin walked away in disdain. The old man restrained restrained himself with all his strength not to put Egg Sin in his place. Lo didn't like the attitude and asked if the family wasn't welcoming him. Cousin Yan hit Shin and shouted that she was just Annie for allowing herself to behave like this. The girl stood up over the protagonist's wife and demanded that she immediately apologize to Liu. At that moment, Yan was interrupted by Liu, and he said that getting tickets became much more difficult. Shin sat on the couch and covered his cheek while being threatened that with this attitude they might not receive an invitation. The cousin clung to Liu and assured that grandfather would solve everything. Suddenly, a threatening smile appeared on Liu's face, and he added that he would need one more person. Then Li replied that Jian would also go with him. Jian didn't like this news very much, but the grandfather just lit a cigarette and told the boy that he could take the two sisters with him. Li yelled at Jian because the girl didn't want to go and explained that Shin would protect her from trouble. Liu hugged the confused girl to himself and ordered the sisters to go with him. The man believed that it would only be beneficial for girls to accompany him for one night and receive his reward. Shin didn't want to participate in it, but the guy reminded her of the safety of his daughter and husband. Liu was happy to see how the beauty obeyed the family rules and threw away her principles. Our main character watched this scene carefully hiding behind the wall of the stairs. Then he called Qing and ordered them to cancel the invitation of the Jian's family and invite only Shin. Meanwhile, outside the house, the sisters approached the gate and Liu was about to leave the house, but Qing appeared in front of him and ordered him to stop. Liu didn't understand who the girl was, but Qing said that the boy couldn't take the girl with him to the celebration. The girl was serious and told him to prepare for a tragic end. The guy assumed that the beauty in front of him was simply jealous and also wanted a ticket to go to the celebration, but his mood dropped instantly when Qing reported that his invitation was disqualified. Jian watched the girl and wondered who she was because she always shows up to save them. Liu didn't believe that a family with a multi-billion-dollar fortune couldn't be invited and thought that the girl in front of him was just an actress. Qing is tired of talking to this guy. At this moment, Shin asked Qing not to worry. Liu had no intention of letting the sisters leave and threatening to make Shin crawl on his knees in front of him. Qing couldn't tolerate the insult and slapped him hard in the face. The guy fell to the ground and looked screaming in anger. He shouted that after this offense she would be destroyed, but Qing naturally threatened to cut out his tongue. Suddenly, the old grandfather appeared in the courtyard. He was angry because he knew that his family would probably miss the invitations. Lin's wife was confused when the old man blamed her, and she replied that she had no influence with what happened. The man wanted to yell at her but was interrupted by Qing's screams. The girl repeated that Liu had no invitations and was disqualified from attending the event. In addition to this information, the girl conveyed to them that of the entire Jin's family, only Shin was invited to Benhai's celebration. This surprised everyone present, especially Grandfather Elder who didn't know the Master Lin guy the girl had mentioned. Qing bowed his head to Shin and promised that an exclusive invitation would be delivered to her soon. The old man didn't believe the girl because he didn't believe that exclusive invitations were given to people on the street. At that moment, a man appeared near the gate and said he had to deliver an invitation to Qin. The grandfather couldn't doubt this man's words, but he couldn't understand how Shin could be invited. Liu got up from the ground and recognized the man like Wang. The guy didn't expect to see him here. Liu told everyone that this man was the organizer of the Benhai celebration, so now he would prove that he was invited. But Wang looked at the beaten man and asked who he was and why he was acting so rudely. Liu pointed to himself and reminded himself that he was the heir of the Liu family. The organizer of the celebration recalled that this year Liu's family could not attend. The old elder received confirmation that Liu's family was deprived of participating in the celebration by the organizer himself. At that moment, Wang asked his assistant to expel Liu so that he would not bother the master. After that, the man smiled sweetly and took the letter at the same time, wondering who Xin was. The protagonist's wife was very worried when she saw that that man was looking for her, but Wang bowed and extended an exclusive invitation sent by Mr. Lin and asked the girl to go to the celebration. Xin accepted the invitation and asked if this Lin was the same person who rented the hotel for her. The man confirmed that this was not the first time Lin gave lavish gifts to the lady. Jian thought that if her sister married this master, they would never have problems again, so she asked if they could meet him. Meanwhile, the protagonist observed the situation from his bedroom window and thought that his wife's younger sister really had a short memory. Soon, Wang explained to the girl that the Lord had many important things to do now, and he had no time for guests. Jin looked carefully at the blonde and reminded her that she should not interfere in Shin's affairs. Jian felt the seriousness of Qin's words and trembled with fear. Then, after slightly annoyed, she replied to Qin that her sister would not let go of her husband. The organizer soon replied that his work was done and bowed before Qin. Qin reminded him that his duties were done and he should go. Suddenly, the old man approached his granddaughters and tried to find out who this master was, who was at Qin's birthday party. Cousin Yan quickly took the girl's note and asked ironically what method she used to conquer this guy. Yan believed that only she was worthy of going to the celebration, but Qin didn't want to give up her seat because she really wanted to check if this master was her husband. But the grandfather stressed out, saying that Qin insisted on putting her husband Shin and daughter above her family. He really wanted Shin to abandon the protagonist and focus on making them rich. Moreover, the old man believed that Lin had become a burden to his family, so Shin allowed the invitation to be withdrawn as long as his family was not affected. Yan was happy because he believed that Yinzhen was not worthy of an invitation. At this moment, the protagonist and king watched this scene. Lin's servant really wanted to come back and teach them a lesson, but the hero forbade her to do so and promised that in the future, he would make them regret their existence. At that moment, King's phone rang. The school principal says that Rui had been sent to the hospital. Lin heard that her daughter had lost consciousness and ordered Chin to start the car immediately. Then, after a few minutes, they arrived at Benhai Central Hospital, where they brought Rui unconsciously. The doctor carefully examined the test results. Chin and Lin entered the room, asking how the girl was feeling. The doctor replied that he ruled out other options and found that the girl had a relapse of an old disease. Lin sat on the bed and asked if it would be possible to transplant bone marrow to save her again. But the doctor decided that first they should invite Dr. Lee to come see Rui. The protagonist was very surprised that Dr. Lee was in town. The doctor replied that Lee came back as soon as he heard the rumor about the master's awakening and is now in the hospital. Lin immediately sent her servant to find the doctor and ordered him to go brought quickly. At this moment, the doctor decided to ask if the protagonist knew the severity of Rui's illness. Lin replies that he was seriously injured at that time and did not understand his daughter's condition. The doctor says that it turns out that 2 years ago, Rui awakened the imperial and royal lineage at the same time, so that's why he fell into a coma. The protagonist was scared and couldn't believe his ears, but Dr. Lee appeared in the room and assured him that the big man had nothing to worry about because he had come to help the princess. The old man was so happy to see Lin again, so much so that tears appeared in his eyes. This reaction made the men in the room feel uncomfortable, and they looked at each other in silence. The god of war decided to return to the main conversation because he was worried about blood fusion in his daughter. Normally, no royal and imperial bloodline would appear in the same person, but Dr. Lee says that nowadays there are only 3 people who have both bloodlines. The protagonist knew that he had both, and there was also another boy in the capital, but he wondered who was the third person he had never heard of before. Lee waited for a dramatic pause, and then with a burst of energy revealed that the third person is Rui. Then the doctor's aura flew around her. The protagonist didn't like it said, and shouted Qing's name. The girl imperceptibly moved behind the old man. Qing held his palm next to his neck and asked the master to explain himself more clearly before touching the girl. Lee says that Lin's royal bloodline was personally forbidden years ago and shouldn't have affected his daughter, then asked if the god of war wanted to know why this was happening. Lin was unsure where the imperial bloodline came from and allowed Qing to let the doctor go. The old man promised that if the girl was by his side, no one would recognize her as a descendant of the imperial bloodline. Lin really expected that and decided to trust Dr. Lee for now. Qing remembered that the school also had to notify Shin, and she would soon be here. The protagonist realized it was time to leave and told Lee that he would know what to explain to Yinsen. Soon after, the protagonist's wife ran through the hospital corridors as fast as she could. She was very nervous and didn't even pay attention to Sun. The guy wanted to know what she was doing here, but the friend got mad because he didn't want any trouble. Sun received a slight blow to his friend's head and admitted that this time he had nothing to do with it. He guessed that the girl was worried about the child. Liu didn't understand why they needed this information, and then Sun explained that Shin would definitely need money for the treatment. Liu knew the poor state that Jian's family was in and prepared to use his chance to make the blonde beg for him. At that moment, Yixin burst into the room and asked worriedly what happened to her daughter. Li asked the woman to be quiet so as not to wake up the little princess. The girl did not expect to see a second doctor besides Shin, so she asked who he was. Dr. Chen introduced his mentor and promised that Rui was safe. Then he snapped his fingers and Rui began to turn around in his bed again. Li said that the girl would soon wake up thanks to acupuncture. Suddenly Rui opened his eyes and tried to find his father in the room. Because he was sure he heard his voice, the mother appeared next to her saying that she fainted at school. So she was lucky enough to meet this doctor who uses traditional Chinese medicine. Rui recognized the man as a brilliant doctor. The old man couldn't contain his feelings and said that the baby was very kind to him. The man leaned over to the girl and started hugging her. Shin was worried that she wouldn't be able to pay for the doctor's appointment because her family wouldn't give her a dime. The man noticed her concerns and said that he would not receive payment from her, since he came in the name of Mr. Lin. At that time, Rui realized that he wasn't imagining things and actually heard his father's voice. Shin quickly asked if the doctor could tell him who this Mr. Lin was and why he is always helping her. Lai couldn't tell the secret, so he just said that Lin is the supreme lord of the southern border, and she will find out the details when it's time. Then the doctor returned the girl to bed and handed her mother a business card, ordering her to call if necessary. Now that Rui woke up, the man was convinced that she was okay, so he could say goodbye and leave the infirmary. The girl called her mother and confessed that Dr. Lee was invited by her father, and she heard his voice while she slept. Although Shin normally didn't believe her daughter's words, she decided to agree because she wanted the great Lord Lin to really be her husband, even because she had never met this unknown man, and Lin's personality would explain a lot. What really bothered her about this theory was the fact that the protagonist didn't directly tell her that he had woken up. Rui noticed that her mother was thinking about something, and these thoughts bothered her a lot. But the woman pretended that nothing bothered her. She winked at her daughter and said that they would go home. Suddenly, Dr. Chen intervened, saying that the little princess should remain under observation for a few more days. Shin was worried about the possibility of having to leave Rui alone in the hospital, but her daughter seemed inspired and promised her mother that she could have some alone time. After that, the girl remained in the hospital and waited for her recovery. Meanwhile, the protagonist was still in the hospital and asked a subordinate if she had found information about the head of the Jin's family. King wasted no time and managed to find something strange in a short period of time. The girl reported that everyone in the family was ordinary people, but Shin's father had something different. The protagonist recalled that he met his wife's father only once, and soon after he ended up passing away. The subordinate confirmed the information and said that she discovered rumors that believed he was not the heir. Lin became interested in this information and realized that if this was true, then the status of his wife's father, it is in question. Lee said that with the help of his position in society, he was able to discover that the emperor had light-haired heirs. This fact could mean that Shin's father was a descendant of the emperor, but it was impossible to know for sure. The old man admitted that he wanted to accept the princess as a disciple. Lin allowed the man to teach the girl how to control her abilities and asked him what else he needed. So, Lee asked Lin to allow him to enter the Binhai celebration. He really wanted to see Lin return. Meanwhile, Shin had no choice and had to leave her daughter at the hospital, so she asked the girl to listen to Dr. Chen. Shin promised Rui that she would definitely come after work. The mother assured her that everything would be fine and then said goodbye. Suddenly, Chen receives a call from her cousin. The protagonist's wife didn't understand what more she could want if she already took the invitation. Yan ordered the girl to go to the company now. After half an hour, Shin went to the office. When he approached the finance department, he heard loud screams. Yan was inside with a cup of coffee and shouted furiously at the employees, asking what they were doing there. Shin didn't want to see his cousin, but she needed to find out why they were looking for her. The girl turned to Shin and was surprised that she was asking such stupid questions. Yan said that Shin was a financial manager and was away from work with the company in crisis. Then she threw coffee at Shin, but the woman managed to dodge and remembered that she had asked for time off today. Yan didn't believe it and promised to deduct half a month's salary and added that next time she will throw it away. Shin tried to argue, but it was no use because the girl believed that her company was in crisis because of people like Shin. The blonde did not consider that the crisis was on her shoulders and remembered that all accounts go through Yan. The cousin realized the accusation and ordered the company to get out of the crisis in 3 days or Shin would be fired. The time was extremely short, and Shin thought that Yan was joking, but that was not the case. The cousin repeated that she would fire her if she failed. Yan was pleased with herself and believed that Shin would never deal with it. Meanwhile, Sun was sitting in the office and said that, just like Liu Yu, he was also tired of waiting, but he added that Yan promised that there would be no problems with Shin this time. Liu was already anxious to know how he would gain an advantage over the girl. Sun smiled happily and was confident that this time they would succeed, but the friend couldn't relax because he remembered that this wasn't their first plan. Sun replied that he had plan B. If the first one went wrong, then Sun questioned Yan's words, which made the cousin worried, and she replied that she wouldn't tell anyone anything. Yan winked, and the men thought that the genetics of the Jian's family were not fair to her. Liu wanted to know from his friend what his plan was because he wanted to be prepared for anything. Sun said that in Shin's life there are two people important to her in a very small way, and the other is her husband Lin. Meanwhile, the protagonist went to his daughter's room and asked if the girl would accept to become a disciple of Dr. Lee. Ray asked if the man would teach her how to heal people. The god of war looked at his daughter with adoration and wanted to say what Lee would teach, but he didn't have time because Qing appeared behind him and reported Shin's problems in the company. The Jian's family was planning to confiscate the house to pay for the losses. Lin asked if anyone was behind it. The subordinate reported that several people saw Liu and Sun in the finance department. Ray was afraid for the mother, but the father convinced her that he would take care of the problems himself and that the daughter should recover. Qing waited for her master's orders and asked if she should bring these two. The protagonist decided that they would deal with them when the time came, but for now, they would take care of Shin. Meanwhile, the wife of the god of war sat in her office for hours and couldn't think of a way out of this situation. It turns out that all the partners of the company withdrew their investments, and even the bank refused a loan. The girl was very worried because there was only 1 day left to solve the problem. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of and someone entered Shin's office without knocking. This person was Sun, and he was following his plan by going to the girl at a difficult time for her. The guy behaved relaxed and told the girl that he had come to help her nobly. Shin got up from the table and didn't plan to accept Sun's help. Then she asked him to leave. The man pressured the girl, reminding her that her family was homeless, but even that didn't convince her. The guy said that he always helps others, then said that he wouldn't bother her anymore, and walked to the exit. At that moment, he said that if she wanted his help, she should go to the hotel by 9 in the morning. Shin was angry at this behavior and shouted that she would never make a deal with such an unscrupulous person. The boy didn't argue. He just said that he would wait for her tomorrow at the scheduled place. The protagonist's wife noticed that this situation was set up by her cousin and son. At that moment, we see Shin's mother going through a stack of papers. She asked why the company's things were sent to their house. The daughter had no choice and said that Yan would confiscate her house. The woman was furious with the news because problems were constantly falling on her family, but she believed that her daughter would ask that guy named Lin to help them, and that would not be a problem for her but the protagonist's wife replied that she never even saw this man. Lee has always began to blame her daughter for all the problems of the family. Shin did not want to disappoint her loved ones. And since the Wang family did not respond to her letter, the girl would have to ask Sun for help. The day of the meeting arrived, and the time of scheduled meeting was approaching. The protagonist's wife arrived at the hotel and saw the right room. She entered and immediately shouted to Sun that she had come, but the man near the window was not Sun. The girl was looking at her feet and didn't notice it. Suddenly, Wang walked away from the window and greeted the girl kindly. Shin saw Wang and concluded that the guy was conspiring with the Sun family to destroy their company. The man approached the blonde and explained that it was a misunderstanding. He said he just doesn't have time and handed him a check. Wang added that Mr. Lin would take care of everything and change the Sun card number with a trick. That's why he was the one who was in this room. Shin was very happy and was sincerely grateful to the person who saved her in this situation. Wang left the room, leaving the girl inside. Then he instantly became serious. He met with the protagonist and reported that his wife's problem had been solved. Now Lin was going to punish the offender. Meanwhile, Liu was sitting in another room. The guy was angry because Ixin hadn't come to him yet. He admitted that the girl was hard to break. Liu's phone rang, and Yan appeared on the screen saying that he knew he could kidnap anyone. Suddenly, the guy hears a knock on the door and ran to answer, thinking it was Shin. However, at the door, he saw a completely different girl from what he expected to see. Ching was there and kicked the man in the face very hard. Liu flew back and hit the table, knocking over the dishes. The girl broke the guy's lip with the blow. Liu didn't understand why that strange girl pestered him and constantly appeared next to him. Ching didn't answer him and went back to the surprised because the guy looked very familiar to him. The protagonist introduced himself as a soldier who served in the army for many years and became known as the supreme leader of the South. Liu felt his body trembling with fear, and he wondered why the guy was helping Shin. Lin explained that she was his wife and pushed the guy to the ground. Liu didn't believe that a disabled person could come to be the leader of the South. At that moment, the protagonist emitted a powerful aura and said he didn't care if the guy believed him. The man leaned towards Liu and grabbed him by the collar of his t-shirt, lifting the guy in the air. Lin believed that the most important thing now was to make the guy pay for this. Humilio didn't believe that the protagonist would dare to do something with him because he was one of the richest heirs. But the guy was wrong and flew against the wall with great force. He was seriously injured and no longer had any doubts about the protagonist's position, then started begging to forgive him, promising to pay any money. Lin looked at the guy and asked if he really looked like someone who Ching watched with a satisfied smile as his master made the guy feel the consequences of his actions. Liu's arm was broken and the rest of his body hurt, but the protagonist decided to stop and said that this was just a warning. Lin wanted the beaten guy to understand that next time he would not be forgiven. At that moment, the hero was about to leave and is always advised not to talk about his identity. After that, they were walking down the hotel corridor when Ching asked if Lin was afraid of something happening. The protagonist promised that if Liu's family tried something, they would all be ruthlessly annihilated. Suddenly, the girl's phone rang and she paused the conversation. Ching was very scared when Dr. Chen reported that the little princess had been kidnapped and her whereabouts were unknown. Lin was also unhinged by this news, and they rushed to the hospital while protecting Shin from this news. They arrived at the infirmary in record time. Dr. Chen was there, and the god of war wanted to know when his daughter disappeared. Chen said that he brought her breakfast and went to prepare for physical therapy. But when he returned, Rui was no longer there. The protagonist hated himself for not being able to prevent the kidnapping of his daughter. Anger filled his body, and he destroyed the floor of the infirmary with one blow. Then Chen fell to his knees and admitted that it was all his fault, and that he should have taken better care of the little princess. But the protagonist said that he doesn't blame him for the kidnapping because the doctor was busy fulfilling his duties. These words left Chen lost. Then Lin ordered Ching to immediately go to the checkpoint and find the kidnapper. At that moment, a guard was sitting in a small room and was involved in a game. He was sure that he had to win. Just at this moment, moment, Ching appeared behind him. She distracted the game guard and reported the disappearance of the patient, asking to give her the camera footage, but the man demanded more detailed information about the missing person. Ching clarified that the patient is a child, and she disappeared about an hour ago. The guard turned to Ching irritably and said that only an hour had passed and they needed to search the hospital first. The man continued to play on his mobile phone and informed him that he would only start the search when a day had passed. Suddenly, a beam of light took the phone out of the guard's hands, scaring the adult man. Lin had no intention of wasting his time, so he was going to do whatever it took. The security guard got angry and shouted that he could not provide records, and besides, the place was forbidden for outsiders to enter. The protagonist released his frightening aura, and Ching realized that mugs would possibly roll, so she hurried to stop the master and decided to present a coupon, stating that they were members of the imperial family. The guard was speechless when he saw the card that represented the imperial family, and was a symbol of the supreme power. Ching strongly recommended that they hurry up and provide the recording. She saw that Lin began to calm down, and the guard went to the computer quickly. He began to look for records of the last hour, and finally found a moment when they could clearly see Ray sleeping in his room. The protagonist looked carefully at the recording and asked to enlarge the lower panel. The recording showed that a man wearing a white coat lifted the girl who was sleeping in bed and took her in a direction unknown. The guard looked at the silhouette of the kidnapper and realized that he looked somehow familiar to him. Lin heard this, and the man reported that this man looked like a hospital intern named Zhao Gang. Ching noticed that he had not seen this guy yet. The guard replied that Zhao was not very popular in the institution and entered here through contacts. He added that 2 days ago, Zhao came to talk to him and asked about the hospital surveillance. This turn of events complicated the situation. Lin began to lose control of himself again. He gave Ching only 5 minutes to look for Zhao Gang. The girl did not discuss about the deadline and immediately disappeared from the office to comply with the order. The guard sensed the oppressive weather and began to worry that he had done something wrong. Lin's dark mood could be felt from a great distance, so the guard chose not to interfere. The protagonist sat in the chair, and the man tried to understand if the members of the imperial family are always terrified. Ching was soon able to the task, and within minutes Zhao was brought to the office. She threw him at Lin's feet and reported that her people found him sneaking through the hospital and immediately grabbed him. The inmate retorted, saying that he is a doctor, that's why he was in the hospital. Lin demanded to know where the boy took the child. Zhao pretended that he didn't understand what kind of child they were talking about. The protagonist had no more patience, and soon his foot began to press on the kidnapper's shoulder so hard that the ground began to crack. Lin pressed until Zhao's right hand was completely pressed to the ground. Ching and the guard watched the interrogation. The man was very nervous about the cruelty with which Lin acted. However, the kidnapper could not stand the torture and said that he was hired. The god of war was happy to hear such a statement, because now he could give himself a reason to stop trying to control himself. Lin got up from his seat and hit Zhao hard. Although at first glance the blow didn't seem strong, Zhao was badly hurt and spat out red liquid. The protagonist didn't allow the guy to catch his breath and stepped on his chest. Lin pressed the kidnapper to the ground with the help of his leg. Zhao tried to seize the moment and pretend he had lost consciousness. Ching immediately saw through him and asked Lin to let her make him talk, but the protagonist replied that he wasn't going to waste time on such things. The young doctor realized that he only had one chance to survive, so he promised to tell everything and immediately said where he had taken Rui. Zhao could barely speak but said that he put the girl in Sun's car and he took her to his house. Lin wasn't too surprised when he heard that name, but now he was sure that Sun would get his end. Zhao says that Sun forced him to go into the hospital and kidnap the girl. Then he asked for him to be released, but Lin believed that the guy had made a terrible mistake and not even exterminating him is enough. After that, the protagonist asked Ching to handle the kidnapper's body and then follow him to Sun's house. Meanwhile, Sun's property was quiet. Rui was tied to a chair and she yelled for her uncle to let her go. She added that she was sure that the police would arrest the man. However, Sun laughed, saying that without evidence, no one would dare to break into the home of an influential family. Sun was a disgusting person and blamed Shin for his actions. The man believed that he had to repay the girl for ruining her health. Sun pulled her cheeks and the girl said that her mother had never done anything wrong. Rui kept resisting because he was sure that his father would soon appear and save her. Sun hit the girl's forehead because she dared to mention Lin in front of him. He says that this garbage was the cause of his suffering. Rui began to cry loudly and suddenly heard a noise of glass breaking. The protagonist appeared behind Sun and immediately hit him in the face. The wall broke and he fell to the ground. The girl saw her father and the tears immediately stopped flowing from her eyes. Rui was happy to see Lin and he started to untie her from the chair, promising the girl that everything would be fine. The girl told her father that she was waiting for him, and the man began to carefully examine his daughter, looking for injuries. The girl told that the bad uncle managed to hit her in the forehead, but as soon as the father arrived, the pain went away. Lin picked up Rui and asked if she was ready to teach the bandit a lesson. The little girl replied that she was ready. Sun trembled when the girl told her father that she didn't remember which hand her uncle hit her with, but she said it was very painful. Sun decided to take advantage of the moment and try to run outside. He wondered how Lin found him so quickly. The god of war listened carefully to his princess's story and drew his own conclusions from it. Sun was already near the exit and believed that he would be saved as soon as he ran out into the street, because he believed that Lin wouldn't hit him in front of everyone. But the guy didn't take into account the fact that Lin was considered the god of war, and his speed surprised people's minds. That's why Sun's escape failed, and now he will have to accept the punishment. Lin looked at the kidnapper scared and said she didn't remember letting him out. Every second, Sun realized the gravity of his offense and was overcome by horror. He decided to try to fight back and aimed at the hand with which the protagonist held his daughter. Then Sun ran as fast as he could and asked for help, hoping that his parents would save him. Naturally, he could run a lot because Lin held the guy tightly by the hand. Then with a skillful movement, he twisted Sun's arm, causing him to scream in pain. Ray covered his ears and complained to his father that that man was too noisy. The protagonist promised that now the bad uncle would be silent, and immediately a blue flame appeared in his left hand. This fire was directed at Sun, and he screamed loudly, causing the girl to close her eyes. Sun's eyes darkened, and instead of screams, almost inaudible squeaks escaped from his mouth and he fell to the ground. At that moment, Lin heard the scream of the head of the family. The man broke into the room and begged to spare his son. The father looked in shock at his son's state and realized that everything was very bad. His chest was burned and his whole body was covered with bruises. His eyes were rolled. Then his father fell to his knees before the god of war and begged him to have mercy and forgive Sun's stupid mistake. But the protagonist was not affected by these words because he did not feel sorry for his daughter. The head of the family knew that they were at a disadvantage. The next moment, screams appeared in the room. Ching reported that everything was fine in the hospital. Ray was frightened by such a sudden appearance, but the father explained that this aunt was his friend and there was no need to be afraid of her. Then Lin handed Ray to Ching to finish off the evil uncles alone. Sun's father couldn't handle the fear. Ray held Ching's shoulders and wished his father to successfully take revenge on Sun. When Ray left the room, the protagonist could show all his power. Eli remembered that he had shown kindness once before. The head of the family tried to take the god of war, reminded the man that he had no right to impose conditions. At this moment, Sun was trying to crawl backwards, but this time his pleas were useless, and Lin finished off the guy with one blow. The father couldn't do anything and had to see his own son going base. It all ended when Lin said it was too late to beg for mercy, and that he doesn't give anyone second chances. He took advantage of the speed and approached Sun's father, who was still in shock. The hero took the man's head and said that it was better for his family to get out of town inside one day, because if they will be beheaded. The father understood that if he didn't want to go to the next world, he would have to agree with Lin and leave the city. After all these events on Lee's property, his father broke into the room and was furious, wanting to find out who dared to hit his son. The father promised to tear the culprit to pieces. Lee wanted to complain to his father as always, but suddenly remembered that if he dared to reveal Lin's identity, the man would destroy him. So for the sake of the family's well-being, the guy had to shut up. He became apathetic and admitted that he didn't know what to say. The head of the family also got angry with his son and slapped him hard in the face, saying that Lee should remember that they own the city. Lee wondered if the Jian's family had more power and decided to keep Lin's identity a secret for now. The father considered his son weak, but added that his story was unnecessary as he had already hired an investigator. Suddenly, a man appeared next to them and reported that he had managed to discover the connection between the culprit and the Jian's family. The father was ready to destroy the entire Jian's family at once. He noticed that the investigator wasn't leaving and assumed he had some more news. He turned out to be right, and the man talked about Sun's murder and added that the killer was the same person who beat Lee. The horror ran through Lee's body, and he was seriously worried that it would be next. His father considered Sun's family a failure for not being able to deal with someone like the Jian's family. The man was completely consumed by the desire for revenge and figured out how to deal with the Jian's family on Benhai celebration night. After some time, it arrived, and it was time for Shin to pick up her daughter from the hospital. The protagonist's wife entered the room and brought a cake, asking how Rui was feeling. But to her horror, her daughter was not in the infirmary. The woman called her daughter in despair, but there was no answer, and she was terrified at the idea that something had happened. The cake fell from her weakened hands. In the next second, Shin heard her daughter's voice. She forgot everything and ran to the girl, asking about her well-being. Rui didn't want to worry her mother and lied that her father took Shin asked the girl not to play with strangers. The woman got nervous when her daughter said that Lin was taking her to play. This is because Shin believed that her husband was at home all this time. Shin watched with emotion as the cake was discovered and noticed that Lin's wife valued her daughter's life above her. Lin was nearby and admitted in an anguished voice voice that Shin was really a good mother. The protagonist was very distressed, saying that he owed her a lot. Then Lin reminded them that it was time for them to go, because this time they are going to the Benhai banquet, so you have to get ready. The protagonist in his last battle, he was ready to fight until his last breath for the peace of his family. Meanwhile, a man was sitting in the pool and drinking wine calmly. He turned to his subordinate and asked if it was true that the great Lin had awakened. The server confirmed that such rumors circulated, and also information emerged that one of the families had already been expelled by him. The Lord of the Dragons believed that this was just a show to show his importance, but in fact his family had already lost its power. The subordinate was convinced that Lin was a threat to the emperor and suggested getting rid of him. The man got angry with the servant and without leaving the pool directed his energy towards him. The guy was thrown back and the Dragon Lord said he didn't remember giving such an order. The servant fell down and insisted that it was dangerous for his majesty to leave the god of war alive, but the Dragon Lord believed that Lin could be useful since he had a good reputation among the people. However, he considered that Lin should be shown somewhere. The subordinate heard the Dragon Lord's words and promised to solve everything. Then the Dragon Lord walked to the center of the pool and extended the hand that did not look human to the spear, but the spear refused to obey, and a red lightning began to appear along its entire length. The dragon god was forced to let go of the spear because it rejected him. The lightning bolt from the spear severely wounded the man in his hand. Suddenly he said that his Lin was still alive, so he needed to be visited. At that moment, the eyes appeared in the man's unusual hand, and the concentrated power began to appear in his palm. The emperor decided that since he could not use the artifact, he would simply destroy it. The lightning from God's own spear lit up all around, accompanied by the mad laughter of man. Meanwhile, in Lin's house, all the family members lived a normal life and spent the night calmly. Suddenly, Lin felt something strange and was surprised to realize that the thunder god's spear had been destroyed. Ching noticed the sudden and drastic change in the protagonist's face and asked what happened. Lin asked about the spear. Ching replied after the border war heard that it was taken by the royal family, but the Laishan spear only recognizes its owner, so it would definitely not be used by third parties. The protagonist replied that the spear had been destroyed a few minutes ago. The girl says that the Laishan spear is a divine weapon, then he didn't understand how he could be easily destroyed. The protagonist replied that this was a warning to him, besides he knew who could destroy the spear, and that person wouldn't miss Banhai's celebration. Then Lin sat in the wheelchair and promised the king that he would gather what was taken from him. At this moment, a man dressed all in black appeared near Lin's house, and he quickly approached the windows. He noticed Lin's room and aimed throwing a blade towards the Prota. The window next to Lin broke, and something passed through her at great speed. Ching realized that a hitman had visited them. Lin managed to lower her head and picked up the blade, remaining unharmed. The subordinate shouted to the main character that she was immediately going after the assassin. Lin carefully examined the dragon god dagger in her hands. Jiang and the mother were sitting in the living room when they heard some strange noises and tried to find out where they came from. Suddenly, the lights in the room went out and the girl looked around in fear. Lin was extremely scared when she realized that there was more than one killer in the house. Jiang screamed when she saw the silhouette of a guy in the darkness right in front of her. The girl tried to find out from the stranger who he was and how he entered the house, but the criminal remained silent. This man was wearing a mask and looked carefully at the girls, saying that they would pay with their lives for covering up for the wrong person. Then a small purple ball began to form in the criminal's hand, and he prepared to attack the girls. Li didn't want to go from the base for no apparent reason and offered to give the man all the money they had. The boy in the mask invited the woman to take her money to the grave. Jiang hugged his mother, who was also trembling with fear. Several agonizing seconds passed until the girls noticed a man holding the criminal's hand. Lin condemned the guy's actions and slightly twisted his arm. The protagonist didn't understand why he attacked defenseless girls. Lin was going to protect the Jiang's family even if she didn't like them very much. Then, a blue lightning appeared in her hand. The criminal still had a free hand and concentrated his power in his fist. The men attacked each other at the same time, and each managed to strike the other's blow. The mercenary laughed and prepared to attack again. The man had fun thinking that Lin was weak. They continued fighting, and soon a knife appeared in the boy's hand with the mask. Suddenly, the door of the house was about to open, and the bandit asked Lin if that was his family. At that moment, the man reacted instantly, and when Shin and his daughter entered the house, there was no one else there. Shin entered and saw the girls terrified. Jiang asked if her sister had returned. Shin was surprised that they were sitting in the dark and went to the switch to turn on the light. When the room was lit, she saw the terrible consequences of the battle and asked horrified what had happened. While the mother was recovering, Jiang said that they were attacked by a guy, but someone managed to save them. Jiang added that the savior looked like that Mr. Lin who showed up on Oxen's birthday. Ray started running into the house and shouting that his father saved the family. Grandmother was disgusted to see this because she considered the protagonist to be trash. Meanwhile, the hero dealt with the criminal and now returned to look at the golden dagger. Ching appeared at the window and regrettably reported that she had failed the task, and the bandit managed to escape. Lin said that this is not important now and asked her to look at the dagger in her hands. Then the subordinate recognized the dagger that the Dragon Lord landlord awarded his servants. In addition, she added that Binhai's celebration was moved to night, which confirmed her hunches. Lin asked Ching to go to Wang and say that he must fetch Axon to ensure his safety. The protagonist understood that they were planning to try something against him at Binhai's celebration, after which Ching said goodbye and left. At that moment, the bedroom door opened with a roar, and the happy daughter ran to the hero. She was sure that it was her father who saved her aunt and grandmother, so her father praised her for her intelligence. Lin took the girl in her arms and asked how she would react if her father wasn't exactly a hero. Rui smiled at his father and admitted that as long as he protects her and her mother, then he will always be a hero. At that moment, Axon entered the room and then asked his daughter not to bother her father. She took Rui in her arms and agreed that they would let her father rest a little longer. Axon really wanted Lin to wake up. Suddenly, she heard the cell phone ringing and answered. Lin's wife heard Wang's voice and asked what happened. The man replied that the celebration was brought forward and someone would pick her up tomorrow, but Axon that she no longer had an invitation. However, Wang assured that the invitation is just a piece of cardboard and she is a respected guest. The girl replied that she was happy with the news and also apologized for the inconvenience. Then Axon stroked Rui's head and asked her to take care of Daddy tomorrow night. The daughter was happy to stay with her father and admitted that she was not afraid of anything by his side. After a day, the night of Binhai's celebration finally came. The huge territory was lavishly decorated. Lin didn't understand why Axon looked so upset at this important event. In fact, Axon was worried about her family, especially after her house was attacked. But the mother rudely replied that her two scum was good for nothing, and now she must concentrate and find a man to marry. Suddenly, they turned their heads, and Shin saw grandfather with Yan. Jiang held his mother and admitted that she was outraged by her cousin's behavior. Yan also noticed her relatives and asked how they got here without an invitation. Jiang shouted that they were honored guests of Lord Wang, and he had personally brought them to the celebration. The guy next to Yuan was surprised by Jiang's beauty, while Yan tried to put herself in a better light. The girl was amused, saying that she had the invitation, and started to tell Jiang to go home. Lin's sister-in-law pointed to Yan and reminded her that this invitation belonged to her sister, so she has to return it. But Yan replied that only a worthy representative gets an invitation. The guy next door finally noticed the invitation and almost choked when he saw that it was purple and gold. These colors were the symbol of the imperial family, and this invitation confirmed the rumors that the Jian's family was close to the Wang family. Suddenly, another man appeared next to Yan and took the invitation, saying it was fake. The girl tried to take it back but failed. The man noticed that her joy didn't last long. Yan was annoyed because a stranger was calling the genuine invitation fake. The old man ordered the girl to watch his tongue and introduced the respected gentleman named Zhou. Yan immediately felt anxious when she realized that an influential person was now next to her. While a member of his family was trying to figure out why there was scum like the Jian family at such a lavish celebration, after these words, the anxiety evaporated, and the irritation and anger returned to their place. But the grandfather stopped Yan. The old man bowed and apologized for his rudeness, and also said that the family was on hand. The man smiled when he heard these words from the head of the Jian's family. Then Zhou rejected the invitation and blamed the Jian's family members for beating Liu. He shouted that he wanted to feel sorry, but now he was considering taking action regarding the situation with Liu. Yan didn't understand what he was talking about and explained that they didn't do anything to Liu. The girl quickly looked at Xian and thought she had something to do with it. At that moment, Yan took Ixin's hand and started accusing her of harming Liu for trying to win her over. Xian replied that it couldn't have been her because he didn't even know about the beating. Liu's father didn't believe the girl and ordered her not to pretend and tell everything. Otherwise, the Jian's family will be forced to immediately leave the city tomorrow. The fight was interrupted by the appearance of Wang. Behind him was the protagonist with daughter and king. Wang would not tolerate those who started family quarrels in this place. Rui saw her mother and called her. The girl held her father's hand and waved happily to her mother, saying that her father asked for a surprise for mom. Zhou looked at the new people with disdain and asked who they were. Liu's father replied that the disabled person in the wheelchair is Ixin's husband named Lin Feng, and the girl is their daughter. Zhou started laughing until he cried, saying that he didn't understand the meaning of this loser is here. The man's laughter was interrupted by Lin. The protagonist asked what he could still do. Shin looked at her husband and couldn't believe that he was really awake. Rui was next to his mother, and now she could show her evidence that she was telling the truth. Zhou believed that waking Lin up was useless, since he was in the wheelchair. The protagonist just snorted at this statement and stood up, releasing a sinister aura. Zhou was very surprised by what he saw and didn't last long to say that he was going to break Lin's legs for what he did to Liu. Now the protagonist was standing to everyone's surprise. His wife couldn't hold back her emotion, and tears flowed from her eyes. Lin reassured her by saying that now everything was going to be fine. Suddenly, Yan started hitting him while asking how Lin dared to wake up so suddenly. The hero just pushed her away and left Qing responsible for resolving the situation. The subordinate receives the order and hits a precise slap on Yan's face. Even after being beaten, Shin's cousin thinks she has the right to threaten Lin and Qing. Joe takes the opportunity to also curse the main character as a cripple. The man adds that even though he has now regained his senses, Lin is nothing but crippled trash. Liu's father shares the same opinion. The protagonist is not offended and says that in 5 minutes the Liu family will no longer exist in Baihai City. King says he will do it right now. Joe and the head of the Liu family burst into laughter. They don't believe that Lin has the power to bankrupt Liu's family. Their joy was short-lived because the old man received a call where he was informed that the company suddenly broke down and all the investors rushed to withdraw the investment. To top it off, the banks refused to lend money. Now the company owes billions directly and are about to go bankrupt. Liu's father was silent in shock. Joe couldn't help but worry because his family's money was also invested in this company. The old man has no way out but to humiliate himself for forgiveness at Lin's feet. He just gets a look of disdain. Joe remained firm in his idea that the main character was no one important, so refused to bow his head to him. Joe felt safe to take down Lin at any time. The protagonist displays his scary aura, and with a smile on his face, asked if the man was ready. In the same second, Joe regrets what he said and tries to avoid any aggression, saying that Lin cannot touch an emissary sent by the royal family to the Binhai banquet. He even displays the royal family badge while saying that he is there, because Supreme Lin didn't recover in time to attend the banquet. The man returned to the capital to recover. That information didn't seem so true to the people in the place, but Joe assured that he wouldn't pass on false information. Suddenly, Lin takes the emblem from his hand, and the guy trembles in fear, asking how he dares to steal something from the royal family. Suddenly, the hero breaks the badge with a beam of blue light and warns that the news that Supreme Lin has returned to the capital to recover is false. For the people of that place to break the emblem is basically to offend the royal family. Yan tells grandfather that he needs to clarify that they have no relation to this crazy cripple, otherwise the Jin's family could be harmed. Rui enters the conversation when he hears the offenses aimed at his father. She says that Lin is not a coward like the Jin's family and can solve their problems alone. Yan is about to beat the little girl while yelling at her to be quiet, but Lin pulls the woman away from her daughter with the power she has in her hands. He reminds Yan that she can't insult the supreme daughter. Shin's cousin falls to the ground after another slap in the face, and she keeps saying that the protagonist is just trash, but soon realizes that he called himself Supreme Lin. Joe is curious to know if Lin is the supreme of the Southern Territory. At that moment, Ching returns to his master and hands over the army uniform. The main character wears the outfit in a few seconds and admits that he is the supreme of the Southern Territory, but she can also call him Lin Feng. Shin is surprised and asks if her husband really was that man who helped her all this time. The protagonist answers affirmatively with a smile on his face. Yan does not believe that he lost such a powerful man to his cousin. The people in the place also did not imagine finding the supreme. Old Lee joins the commotion while cursing everyone as idiots for not noticing the medal on Lin's uniform. The guests are shocked by the appearance of the royal family's doctor in this place. Lee kneels before the protagonist while saying he will follow him until the end of his life. Lin tells the doctor that he doesn't need so much formality. Joe remains in denial. He says out loud that he still doesn't believe that Lin Feng and Supreme Lin are the same person. For him, the protagonist just paid someone to act. Dr. Lee can't stand such insolence and hits Joe in the stomach with a punch. The guy falls to the ground, holding his belly while saying that an old man should not assault a young man. He tries to threaten the doctor, saying that there are important people in his family who will not let this go in vain. Lee holds a power in his hands while saying that he will ensure the defeat of these superiors after Joe is eliminated. In the next moment, the guy is thrown out with a punch in the face. Lee asks the supreme leader to give some order. The protagonist just told Wang to expel the Zhou family, the Liu family, and the Jian's family. After all, they were not invited. The banquet will officially open after the expulsion. Yan and his grandfather realize that they will be expelled, but the girl yells that Shin should be expelled too. After all, she is from the Jian's family. While the old man talks to his granddaughter, Jiang realizes that his brother-in-law is really the Supreme Lin. His mother is also embarrassed for having treated him so badly all this time. Meanwhile, the nobles toast with their glasses, celebrating the return of the Supreme. They were finally able to see the hero with their own eyes. On the other hand, the Jian's family was kicked out of the banquet venue. Yan keeps complaining while his grandfather says that it makes sense because Lin was a very famous general before she got in that wheelchair. The girl is sure that the protagonist is pretending to be the Supreme. She vows to seduce Lin because she is sure that Shin is not a woman worthy of marrying this man. Meanwhile, in the capital, the young emperor, known as the Lord of Dragons, received alarming news. Zhou had been defeated by Qin, and Lin had not only expelled him from the banquet, but also destroyed the emblem of the royal family. The emperor's eyes burned with rage as he assumed Qin was severing all ties with the royal family to side with Lin. He ordered his subordinate to handle the matter immediately. Trembling, the servant stuttered that he couldn't even get close to them. The Lord of Dragons roared in anger, unleashing a beam of purple light that trapped the terrified servant. His voice thundered as he declared that the Zhou family must be allowed to destroy the Jian family, and that they were authorized to use the #1 weapon against Lin if necessary. The servant, barely breathing, agreed to carry out the order. The emperor sneered, saying he might have spared such a useless thing if it had remained crippled, but now he intended to crush it completely. Later, as the banquet came to an end, Lin returned home with his wife and daughter. Shin's mother whispered to the youngest daughter that today had been a day of great harvest. Meanwhile, Rei noticed her mother's sadness despite the celebrations and quietly told her father about it. As everyone entered the house, Li proudly showed Jiang the jewelry she had received from one of the nobles, gifts given after they learned she was the mother-in-law of the Supreme. Jiang gasped at the sight of the treasures, and both women screamed with delight, shouting that they were now rich. Amid the excitement, Shin calmly said that she and Lin had something important to share. The women, still dazzled by the jewelry, barely paid attention. Shin asked Rei to go to her room because they needed to have an adult conversation. She promised to come upstairs later to put her to sleep, and Lin also promised he would be there. Obediently, the little girl went upstairs. Now all eyes were on Lin. Someone asked when he had woken up. Lin replied that it happened suddenly after seeing his daughter being bullied. Out of nowhere, Shin slapped him across the face. Through tears, she cursed him, saying he could have told her sooner. So much pain could have been avoided. Lin caught her hand gently and said he woke up but avoided revealing it because he thought she might choose that other man. Shin turned her face away, letting go of his hands. She confessed bitterly that she had no other choice if she wanted to keep their daughter safe and well-raised. At that moment, Lin wrapped his arms around her, whispering that she and Rei were the only people he had. From this day forward, no one would ever dare to harm them again. Softened by his words, Shin hugged him back. Lin finally felt calm enough to focus on what lay ahead. He needed to unlock the royal bloodline and locate the 3 great generals, the White Tiger, Red Bird, and Zhuan, who were now part of his plan. The next morning, the family sat together for breakfast. Jiang casually read the news, asking if her brother-in-law was truly the Supreme Lin, since his image was all over the internet, with people talking about the return of the powerful general. Lin simply replied that she should believe whatever she wanted. Trying to win him over, Jiang claimed she had taken care of him all this time. Lin thanked her for the supposed care, even though he knew she was lying. Suddenly, the front door burst open. Shin's mother stormed in, holding an envelope in her hands, with Jiang right behind her. The old woman accused Lin of pretending to be the Supreme, while putting the Jian family at risk of losing everything. Calmly, Shin asked what she was talking about. The woman threw the envelope on the table and told her to see for herself. Shin opened it while Jiang smirked, revealing that she had investigated him and discovered he was not who he claimed to be. The letter stated that the protagonist came from Nilyu village in the Quanhai district of Binhai City, describing him as an unemployed man. Shin was shocked, but she refused to accuse her husband of fraud. Lin looked at Jiang and coldly told her to speak up and say what she really came for. Shin's cousin arrogantly announced that she brought the information requested by their grandfather. From today, they were all expelled from the Jian family, and Shin was no longer employed by the company. She added that by the grandfather's order, they must leave the house immediately. Lin looked at his daughter and asked softly if she wanted to live in a house facing her mother. Rei answered yes, though her voice trembled with apprehension. Shin, still worried after losing her job, couldn't hide her fear about their future, but her husband reassured her, saying she had nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Li silently cursed both her daughter and Lin, calling them 2 losers. Lin, however, ignored the negativity, focusing only on protecting his wife and daughter. He called Qing, instructing her to come pick them up and take them to the Bixu Lake area. Hearing this, Yan laughed mockingly, saying that Bixu Lake was a place only millionaires could afford, and accusing him of lying again about being supreme. The protagonist calmly told his wife to follow him, and she obeyed without hesitation. Yan, still sneering, asked if he planned to live on the streets with Shin and Rei. As they prepared to leave, Lin remembered how the current house had once been a wedding gift to him and his wife, but he now insisted on leaving it behind. At that moment, Qing arrived. Jiang immediately recognized the subordinate and started piecing together her brother-in-law's true identity. Realization hit her. Lin really was the Supreme. Determined to stay close to power, she tried to leave with them, pulling her mother's arm, but Li, convinced Lin was a fraud, refused to go. Yan, annoyed that no one was taking her seriously, grumbled as they departed. Sometime later, the protagonist arrived at their new property. Rei's eyes sparkled with excitement as she explored the place. Lin instructed Qing to ensure his daughter's safety, and she obeyed, leading Rei to see every corner of their new home. Noticing Shin's somber expression, Lin asked if something was wrong. She admitted she was afraid all of this was just a dream. Lin gently held her face, assuring her it was reality and that they would be happy as a family again. Even without fully regaining his strength, he promised to protect her. He added with conviction that no one would ever bully her again. Still, Shin looked unconvinced. Wanting to make her smile, Lin suddenly shouted that he had bought the only village in the entire city of Binhai overlooking the sea, then asked if she liked it. Shin burst into laughter, teasing that people shouldn't know the Supreme had such a cute side. Lin replied that this side was only for his family to see. At that moment, the phone rang. Lin stepped away to answer it. Shin decided to take Rei inside while he worked. During the call, Lin said he was already on his way. His wife stopped asking what had happened. He explained that it was a call from the army and that he needed to leave for a while. Rei shouted for her father to play with her, but Lin told Shin he would likely be away for 2 or 3 days. She feared being abandoned but forced a smile, saying she would take care of Rei while he was gone so he could focus on work. He kissed her forehead, promising that Ching would stay to protect them. Hours later, the protagonist arrived at the army office and called for Long Tao. The soldier rushed forward, embracing Lin and saying how much he had missed him. The other soldiers, unaware of who he was, stood confused until Long shouted that this was Supreme Lin, the highest commander of the Binhai military department. Immediately, the men bowed their heads in respect. Long explained that he had taken over as supreme commander during Lin's absence, but now intended to return the position and retire. Lin questioned whether he truly wanted to retire so soon, now that he had become a major general. Long sighed, saying the command post had changed drastically, with almost all positions now under the royal family's control. He was glad Lin had returned. Finally, there would be fresh air in this chaotic environment. Lin thought to himself that soon, more people from the royal family would likely infiltrate the command post. Long, noticing his expression, asked if he really believed that would happen. The protagonist replied by asking if this wasn't the reason he had called him. Long admitted it was, saying he had been so excited by Lin's return that he had almost forgotten. He then took out several files, handing them to the Supreme. Inside were detailed envelopes outlining the rotation of national military commanders since the day Lin had been incapacitated. The reports also contained crucial updates about the ongoing battle at the border. Lin carefully read through the documents and stated that nothing catastrophic should happen since the military departments were under royal control. Long immediately countered, saying that this was precisely the issue. These royals were so used to being respected that they had no clue how to lead an army. While the southern regions were safe, 10 cities in the northwest were being bombed, and they had no further details. News was being blocked, and no word had come from their messenger. Lin asked if the White Tiger was in the northwest and had lost the 10 cities. Long confirmed, explaining that it had been 5 months since they received the last letter from the messenger. The protagonist opened the secret message left by the White Tiger. The spy reported that the northwest had fallen. The royal family was involved, and he doubted he could survive until the supreme leader's awakening. His final request was for no one to mourn him if he didn't make it through the battle. Rage boiled within Lin at the thought of losing his messenger. Long reminded him that the superior of the military department was the Dragon Lord, which made it strange for the entire royal family to claim control. Lin admitted he had doubts, and revealed that he had sent someone to investigate the capital. In his mind, he concluded that Shenyan was willing to sacrifice the entire country for his own gain. 2 days passed. The scene shifted to the Jian company. Shin's grandfather sat deep in thought, unsure if firing his granddaughter had been the right decision. Yan, focused on applying lipstick, reassured him by saying Lin was a fraud and Shin was useless. But the old man hesitated. Since her departure, every business partner had withdrawn their capital, leaving the Jian family with nothing. Playing the innocent, Yan claimed everything would turn out fine. The old man slammed his hand on the table, furious, shouting that nothing would be fine. All the partners had abandoned them to join Lin. Yan, desperate, blamed everything on her cousin, saying none of this would have happened if the finance department hadn't been under Shin's control. Taking a deep breath, the grandfather told her to hurry. They were going to meet the old man. This patriarch, before his death, had left behind a letter to be opened only in a time of absolute desperation. The grandfather believed the letter might hold the key to saving the family. Later that day, the protagonist returned home. He turned on the lights, accidentally waking his wife, who had fallen asleep on the couch. Shin stirred and asked softly if he was back. Lin covered her with his coat, asking why she hadn't gone to bed. She replied that she had been waiting for him. Feeling relieved to see him safe, she decided to head to the room, advising him to get some rest as well. From the window, Ching appeared. Lin asked if she had any reports. She delivered 3 critical updates. First, since Shin's departure from the company, all major partners had cut ties with the Jian family, causing losses so severe that the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Second, the Dragon Master was under house arrest. He was unharmed, but his power had been transferred to one of his former unknown rivals. Third, news of the White Tiger's messenger. 5 months ago, he was last seen at the northwest frontier in a place called the Masterless Kingdom. Lin's expression hardened. He recognized the name. Ching added that the place was now in ruins. Lin nodded, saying that was all he needed to know. The information confirmed to him that a world of internal and external chaos was approaching. The next morning, the hero prepared a lavish breakfast, waking his family with the delicious aroma. Jiang, still half asleep, was surprised to see the table set so beautifully by her brother-in-law. Lin explained that the meal was especially for Ray and Shin. Soon his wife appeared, rubbing her eyes, clearly exhausted. He pulled out a chair for her, teasing that she probably hadn't rested well because she stayed up waiting for him. Shin admitted she had been thinking about getting a new job last night. Suddenly, Lee spoke up, her voice cutting through the peaceful atmosphere. She said it was time for Lin to pay for being taken care of during the 2 years he had been incapacitated. The mother-in-law demanded money as compensation, blaming him for the family's downfall after his awakening. Shin immediately defended her husband, telling her mother to stop talking nonsense. But the woman wouldn't stay quiet, continuing to insult Lin. Embarrassed, Shin apologized to her husband, explaining that her mother only cared about money. The protagonist laughed, saying that in a way his mother-in-law was right. He indeed had to secure money for the house. He then took the chance to ask how his father-in-law had passed away. Shin replied that her father died in a car accident. Needing more details, Lin looked to Jiang, who said she didn't know much. She suspected Yan and the others had framed her father, likely because he had been chosen by their great-grandfather as heir to the Jian family. The relatives were furious, and when he died, their family didn't receive a single penny of the inheritance. Furious, Ray shouted that they must recover her grandfather's inheritance. Jiang, irritated, snapped at her, saying a child knew nothing about such matters. But Ray pulled out a necklace her grandfather had given her, saying he wanted to give it to her in due time. Lin took the necklace in his hand, instantly recognizing it was made of evolutionary stones. Shin, curious, remembered seeing the necklace once in her father's office. The protagonist knew this was no ordinary necklace. The royal family possessed special lineage abilities, but to evolve, they required an advancement spawn combined with a secret method. Suddenly, a beam of blue light burst from the necklace, wrapping itself around Lin's hand. Ray, mesmerized, grabbed the stone from her father's hand. It was too late to stop her. The blue glow enveloped the girl, and both parents screamed in fright. The light entered her stomach and vanished. The girl collapsed, but quickly stood up, saying she felt something enter her belly. Shin panicked, asking what happened. Lin explained that the evolution stone had been activated by him, but had chosen Ray on its own. Now it was likely that her bloodline skill had awakened. There was no other choice. He had to call Dr. Lee. The doctor answered quickly, worried something had happened, but before Lin could explain, the phone slipped from his hand and began floating. Cutlery around the room also levitated, as if affected by electromagnetic forces. This was all because of Ray's newly awakened power. While chaos unfolded in the protagonist's house, Jiang was relaxing quietly on the beach. Her peace was broken by screams from the residents. Lin rushed out, carrying his daughter in his arms. Shin also ran out, warning her sister it was dangerous to stay. Jiang tried to understand what was happening, but her sister left her behind. A huge shadow suddenly covered the sun. Looking up, Jiang froze. An enormous wave was towering over them. The wave crashed down, knocking the girls to the ground. Shin shouted again for her sister to escape, but Jiang remained paralyzed, thinking they were under attack by some army of the sea. Without wasting time, Shin ran, dragging whoever she could. Later, Dr. Lee met with the hero and asked if he was sure about suspending the royal bloodline. Lin replied that Ray's true ability was electromagnetic power, a power so rare it was only mentioned in royal legends. He wouldn't risk his daughter, so his plan had to proceed. He asked if the 10 miles of coastline were cleared. Qing confirmed they were. Lin ordered her to get ready. The group boarded the boat and began preparations. Dr. Lee started acupuncture on Lin, warning him there were 9 prohibition levels to unlock, from bottom to top. The protagonist braced himself, knowing exactly what to do after each needle was applied. When Dr. Lee reached specific meridians, he extracted something from Lin's back, causing him to scream in agony. Despite the pain, he forced himself to endure. So far, he had unlocked 5 layers. Lee pressed on with the painful method because the hero still needed to break through 4 more. Ray watched, tears in her eyes, worried about her father as she saw how much he was suffering. But the procedure wasn't over yet. As night fell and the sky turned dark, someone watched the boat from the water. This figure wasn't alone. Taking a blade from his clothes, he warned his team that it was time to move. Just then, he was caught off guard by an unexpected apparition. Lin glared angrily at the man. The enemy desperately tried to report to his master, but before he could say anything, a bolt of lightning struck him, electrocuting him on the spot. Lin immediately turned to Qing, scolding her for not keeping watch on the sea as she had claimed there were no enemies lurking. The girl lowered her head, ashamed, and apologized for her failure. The next day, the protagonist returned home to care for his wife. Shin had a fever, so he left her resting in bed. Soon after, Lin told Long he had something important to discuss. His wife stirred, speaking a few weak words, and he quickly approached, asking if she was all right. The first thing Shin asked was where their daughter was. Lin reassured her that Ray was with Dr. Lee. Meanwhile, in another room, the doctor tried to get Ray to say how she was feeling. The girl thought for a moment and answered that she didn't know. She'd have to ask her father. At that moment, Lin appeared, carrying Shin in his arms, and asked what was happening. Ray ran into her mother's embrace, happy to see she had woken up. The hero gently took his daughter, telling her to let her mother rest for now. Lee then warned the Supreme that he needed to take the girl with him. Shin immediately grew worried and demanded to know why. Lin explained calmly that Rei had awakened the power of the royal bloodline and needed guidance. No one was better for that task than Dr. Lee. The doctor joined the conversation, explaining to Shin that a fierce battle was raging in the northwest, but the royal family was hiding it from the public, creating a false illusion of peace. He added that Rei's awakening was unexpected, and that the one currently controlling the capital was a mortal enemy. Therefore, Shin and her daughter could become the Supreme's weak point if they couldn't protect themselves. Even after hearing this, Shin hesitated to let her little princess leave. She insisted Rei should stay home. Lee patiently convinced her, saying he would only be with the girl for a year. He promised to teach her everything he had learned in his life and swore she would not be harmed. The protagonist left the decision in his daughter's hands, promising not to force her. Rei, imagining the powerful enemies her father would face, feared he might end up crippled again. Determined to become strong enough to protect him, she chose to go with the doctor. Lee praised her courage and urged them to hurry. Before leaving, Rei handed an agenda to her father, asking him to keep it safe until they met again. She admitted she didn't feel she had spent enough time with him since his awakening. Lin, with a sad expression, apologized for not being more present. Wanting to leave quickly, Rei pulled the doctor along, saying she would return in the future. Shin didn't even have time to say goodbye. Her daughter had already run off. Outside, Rei thought to herself that she needed to protect her parents. Back inside the house, Lin promised his wife that their daughter would be fine. Shin, still worried, asked if he would leave again. Lin confirmed, saying there was news from his subordinates in the northwest, but he promised to put everything in order before departing. The next day, in the Jian family's village, Shin asked in surprise why they had come there. Lin promised that soon everything would become clear. At that moment, Shin's grandfather and her cousin approached them. The old man demanded to know the reason for their visit. Lin took an envelope from Qing's hand and tossed it to the old man, telling him to read it. The documents contained information gathered by his subordinates that very morning. As they read, the old man and his granddaughter's expressions turned grim. Turning to Shin, Lin revealed that the car accident involving her father had been no accident. It was intentional. The mastermind behind it was Yan. The cousin screamed, pointing her finger at Lin, accusing him of planting false evidence. The old man, enraged, slapped his granddaughter across the face and admitted he had been blind for years. Shin was shocked by the confession, while Yan tried to defend himself, shouting that he hadn't murdered the third uncle. Yan tried to justify herself, saying she only wanted to warn that the Ginger family belonged to her and her father. She never imagined they were dealing with two monsters. In the end, she added, their uncle had just been unlucky. Those monsters tore him apart, so it wasn't her fault. The protagonist understood the hidden meaning in her words and suspected there were other people behind the so-called accident. However, Shin, confused by the subliminal message, shouted at her cousin to explain everything clearly. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the shadows, saying to its master that Lin had noticed them. The protagonist laughed coldly, remarking that the Jin family might seem to have gained weight, but they were hiding rats within their walls. At lightning speed, Qing dashed toward the source of the voice, so fast no human eye could follow. The old man begged Lin not to harm the Jin family just because he was displeased. The protagonist calmly replied that he only wanted to know which rats were lurking nearby. Moments later, Qing burst into a hidden room and tackled a blue-haired man. The intruder laughed, saying his mission was already accomplished, and she would never be able to hold him. He tried to escape, but a fierce fight erupted. Despite his efforts, Qing neutralized him and dragged him back to the main hall, throwing him at her master's feet. Realizing there was no way out, the man's body erupted into a terrifying transformation, two horns sprouting from his forehead. Lin immediately recognized it as a mutation of the royal bloodline. Yan pointed at the creature, screaming that it was one of these monsters that murdered her third uncle. The protagonist stepped in front of Shin, shielding her while leaving the fight to Qing. The loyal subordinate materialized a shining dagger in her hand. The mutant snarled that he would take her down and then finish off Lin. With his claws igniting in flames, he lunged at Qing, but she moved with precision. In an instant, her dagger slashed across his neck. The mutant collapsed, choking on his own blood. Yan stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend how someone could defeat such a monstrous creature with a single strike. As the enemy's body fell lifeless, Qing noticed something in his possession. She picked it up and handed it to her master. Lin examined the small device and immediately recognized it as a communication tool. A voice came through. It was Zhou Shan. On the other side, Zhou Shan asked how he knew who was listening. Lin's anger flared. He had spared this man at the banquet, but now his patience had reached its limit. The old man of the Jian family paled, fearing that the protagonist would confront Zhou, whose family was highly influential. He begged Lin to remember that he had once been saved by the old master. Lin replied coldly, that when Master Jiang saved his life, he had promised to protect the Jian family for 30 years. But that promise was broken the moment they insulted his wife. The bearded old man tried to argue, saying that one day Yixin would inherit the family so he should reconsider. Yan, furious, yelled at her grandfather that this family belonged to her and her father. Ignoring the chaos, Lin asked his wife to make a decision. Without hesitation, Xin said she didn't want to go back. The grandfather was shocked by her words. After everything, she had no desire to live with these people, especially after being expelled from the family. Respecting her decision, the protagonist took her by the hand and led her out of the house, while the old man shouted for her to wait. Lin stated firmly that this wouldn't be unfair to Master Jiang. He would personally deal with the Zhou family. From that moment on, there was no longer any debt between him and the Jian family. Outside, the old man and Yan fumed at the way the situation had ended, their faces twisted in anger. Walking away, Lin told his wife he would be gone for 2 days to resolve an issue in the capital, leaving Qing in charge of protecting her. Yiqin felt she was giving her husband too much work, but the subordinate reassured her that he only needed to take care of a matter in the capital. Curious, Xin asked who this person in the capital was, the one Lin had been mentioning. Jing answered that it was Shen Yan, the most powerful member of the royal family in the capital. Xin had never heard that name, yet just hearing it gave her a deeply unsettling feeling. Qing advised Xin to get in the car and head home while Lin dealt with the rest. A few hours later at the Zhou family estate, the family patriarch discussed the investigation. He complained there was still no news regarding Lin or the Jian family. A man wearing a green hat replied that the young emperor was growing impatient. While the Zhou family still had support today, they would be abandoned if they proved useless. The head of the Zhou family nodded, saying he understood. After all, his son had been beaten by that man. The green-hatted advisor suggested they take advantage of Lin's incomplete recovery and finish him off in one strike. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. Lin appeared, dragging Zhou by the hair. His cold gaze scanned the room, searching for the one in charge. The man in the green hat stepped forward, demanding to know who dared break into their home. Zhou, trembling, shouted to his grandfather that this was Lin Feng. The old man burst into hysterical laughter, mocking the protagonist for walking straight into his trap. He said Lin had saved them the trouble of hunting him down. Striking the ground with his cane, the patriarch activated a mechanism that dropped a giant cage onto Lin. He sneered, advising Lin to hand over the Yan family and renounce his royal bloodline if he wished to live as a dog. Otherwise, he would not leave alive, and his head would be offered to the young emperor. Zhou's father begged the old man to wait, pointing out his son was also trapped inside. Zhou screamed for help. Finally, the protagonist let go of Zhou and said with a cold smile that he hated being trapped with dogs. The last time that happened, his enemy ended up dead. Zhou screamed again, calling for his father. The grandfather warned Lin he would be eliminated if he continued his defiance, revealing he didn't care about his grandson. Pressing a button on his cane, he unleashed lightning into the cage. Zhou was electrocuted, his screams filling the room, while Lin stood unharmed, unaffected by the attack. Zhou's father cried out for the old man to stop, but the patriarch replied coldly that losing his grandson was acceptable. They would be rewarded by the young master once Lin was dead. Mocking, the protagonist asked if Shen Yan had already become a young emperor. He found it strange that the Zhou family's loyalty ran so deep when Shen Yan hadn't even warned them these tricks were useless against him. Suddenly, Lin gripped the bars and ripped the cage apart with his bare hands. The old man stumbled back, shouting that he had never seen such strength. Calling for reinforcements, he summoned dozens of soldiers. Now feeling secure with numbers, he ordered them to destroy Lin. Bullets flew at the protagonist, but they bounced harmlessly off his shield. He retaliated, dashing forward and taking down the snipers barehanded. A second wave launched specialized arrows, but Lin caught one mid-air with his fingers. The old man revealed these were special armor-piercing rounds, a weapon designed specifically to counter the royal family, now repurposed to serve the young emperor's will. The soldiers intensified their assault, sending more ammunition while setting off the gasoline behind Lin. A massive explosion consumed the area. Convinced of victory, the old man declared that even if his mansion was gone, the threat had been eliminated. His joy was short-lived. Out of the flames, Lin emerged unscathed, moving like a phantom. With a swift strike, he slashed the old man's head with his blade. The patriarch collapsed lifeless to the ground. The only survivor was Zhou's father. Desperate, he screamed for the #1 weapon to appear. Two monstrous figures entered the room. The boss reminded them that Master Shen had ordered the extermination of the Jian family, and if they failed, they too would be eliminated. Lin immediately recognized them as mutants who had absorbed fragments of the royal bloodline. They attacked in unison, overwhelming with sheer numbers, but Lin was faster. He delivered a devastating punch to the face of the blue-skinned monster, sending it crashing into the wall. The red demon tried a sneak attack but was blocked and thrown aside like a rag doll. Their mutation enhanced their physical abilities and appearance, but it still wasn't enough to match the Supreme. Though curious about what made these mutants special, Lin had no time to waste. Pulling a firearm from his suitcase, he unleashed precise shots, tearing through their defenses. Finally, the protagonist detonated an explosive, engulfing the entire room in flames and ending the fight with a powerful blast. Meanwhile, Zhou's father rushed to the office and tried to report to the young emperor. Shen Yan appeared on the big screen and asked what happened. The man nervously informed him that Lin went directly to the Zhou family and that the #1 weapon was used to deal with him. The Dragon Lord demanded to speak to the old man of the family. The boss couldn't admit that his father had passed away during the duel with the Supreme, so he lied, saying the old man was still fighting. Shen told him to stop lying because his face revealed despair. At that moment, a hand pierced through the man's shoulder, and lightning consumed his body. The protagonist had finally found Shen. The Dragon Lord laughed, saying it was expected of the Supreme to dare to go to the Zhou family alone and even finish off their weapons. Lin admitted that the special armor-piercing bullets could indeed hurt the royal bloodline, but mocked Shen, pointing out that he had forgotten the weapon and the containment method must be used together to work. Shen cursed the Zhou family in his mind, calling them dumb. Lin tapped his own head and mockingly said that Shen needed intelligence to keep up with him. The Dragon Lord calmly replied that the royal family was under his control and that the only reason Lin was still alive was because he had some reputation among the people. He added that he could give him the opportunity to obey and witness the true supreme act. The protagonist replied that Shen had murdered many members of the royal family to achieve his own glory, calling it ridiculous. Shen said Lin was too naive, claiming it was necessary to achieve power. Suddenly, a countdown caught the hero's attention. It was a self-destruct bomb left by the Zhou family. Shen kept saying that his supreme artifact was destroyed, and it was naive to think he would win this fight. At that moment, an explosion consumed the entire mansion. Meanwhile, at the protagonist's house, Shin woke up desperate after having a bad feeling. She tried to call her husband to make sure he was okay, but the number was unavailable. Qing entered the room after hearing a strange movement and asked if something happened. Shin said she was worried about Lin because she had a nightmare. The subordinate assured her that everything was fine with the master, but offered to use the emergency contact channel if she insisted on talking to the Supreme. Shin understood that she might distract her husband if he was dealing with something important, so she gave up on contacting him and told Qing to go rest. The subordinate agreed, saying to call her if needed. Shin went back to bed, saying she was sure Lin would be okay. The next day, Shin was taken to the hospital in Banhai Center after feeling sick the night before. The protagonist went to see her and asked the doctor what happened. The doctor said she was fine after some tests and that it was probably just tiredness, so she would return to normal after some rest. Lin looked at the doctor and asked if there was anything else. The doctor confessed he found something strange. He had done a complete examination and found an abnormal discharge in her brain while she was sleeping. He handed the report to Lin, explaining that the abnormality manifested like a shock or a psychiatric disorder, but suspected the nightmare was most likely the result of recent events. He promised to take care of it calmly and would confirm it later. Outside the building, there was a protest. The population shouted to let the Chinese head of state speak. Lin watched the commotion through the window, his expression dark. Suddenly, Qing burst into the infirmary in desperation, saying that the situation in the northwest was completely out of the royal family's control. The internet was now full of news about the battle. Lin finally understood why the population was screaming in the streets. He questioned if there was any action by the military units in the west and north. The subordinate replied that the informant reported that the two military departments had discovered spies. Shenyan was overwhelmed with work, and because of that, the contract was torn apart, exposing the truth to China. Qing added that people worldwide had launched petitions online, demanding that the general take the commander's position. She wanted to know what action Lin would take. The protagonist understood that the people wanted the commander of the military department of Binhai City expelled because of his ties to the royal family. Now the population was shouting for Lin to take command. The hero thought about the decision he had to make and ordered Qing to continue securing the area while he was away. The scene shifted to the army office, where Long grew angry when someone entered the room without knocking, only to relax when he saw it was the protagonist. Lin scolded him for sleeping while the Northwest was in chaos. The soldier snapped back to reality as Lin explained he didn't come to issue orders, but to ask him to join him on the mission to the Northwest. Long objected at first, saying no expedition should move without an officer in command. Lin clarified that this wasn't an expedition. He simply wanted Long to accompany him. The soldier, unaware of the latest news, was shocked when Lin revealed the situation had already leaked online. Fired up, Long said he only needed a gun to take down the invaders one by one. He agreed to follow his old master to win the battle and save China. Minutes later, a helicopter landed to pick up the soldiers from the army's rooftop. Wang was there to receive the last orders before Lin's departure. The protagonist handed him the emblem of his private force, the Heijia army, and said the city of Binhai would now be in his hands. He instructed Wang to use the emblem only as a last resort to provoke the black armored army. Wang smiled, assuring his master that the city would remain under control. Holding the badge, he took a pocket watch from his suit and handed it to Lin. Inside was a photo of Shin, something she had asked to be delivered to him. Lin thanked him, promising he would return safely for her. Long tried to bring his friend back to focus, saying that love weakened a man's fighting spirit, so they needed to move quickly. As they prepared to leave, someone shouted for them to wait. Surprised, the protagonist asked how he had arrived here. The blue-haired man said there was no place in China he couldn't reach. Lin was pleased with Feng's appearance, and Long was stunned to see the Dragon Master standing before them. Lin said that with this man, their chances of victory had just increased. The three boarded the airship and left Binhai City. During the flight, Feng explained that the position of Dragon Master was originally given to ordinary people with no royal lineage to control the military departments, keeping the royal family's power in check. However, Feng had been so absorbed in his research that he hadn't noticed Shenyan had already sent people to eliminate him. He was kidnapped one day and kept under house arrest in Shenyan's residence, forced to study the fusion of royal bloodlines and the descendants of royalty. Lin asked if his research had succeeded. Feng went straight to the point, saying that initially the fusion worked. Shenyan had used the corpses of countless kings to suppress his bloodline's revolt. Feng only managed to escape thanks to the ritual, which delayed Shenyan's plans. Lin said it was good that he was now safe. The driver interrupted, announcing they were 50 miles from Yingjiao City. The soldiers stood and opened the door, ready to jump. Before they leaped, Lin warned them there was a high chance they would receive no reinforcements for this mission. He asked if they were sure about going. Long and Feng shouted they were ready. The three jumped from the helicopter together. Sometime later, the group arrived in Yingjiao, located in the northwest. Long noticed that upon entering the area, communications and statistics were already unavailable, and details about the territory were unclear. He decided to ask a local resident for help, introducing himself as a member of the China Task Force. The man slammed the door in his face. Long realized they were not welcome in this city. The protagonist said they could gather the information themselves and asked Long to check the map to see how far they were from the fort. Long replied that beyond the sand dunes, there were still 30 kilometers to go. As they planned their next move, they were secretly watched by a little boy hiding behind the rocks. The protagonist approached and offered chocolate in exchange for information. Then he asked if the boy knew where the headquarters were located. The boy grabbed the candy without hesitation and asked if the Chinese soldiers were really going to fight the bandits. When Lin confirmed, the boy said they should follow him. Along the way, the group learned that several intruders from the royal family had already entered Yingjiao. The boy spun a key around his finger and explained that no one in the city would dare help the soldiers. His father had changed ever since his brother died. All the brave men in this place were murdered, so no one passed on information anymore. He warned that he would only help them once. If this wasn't enough, they were on their own. Using the key, the boy opened a door, revealing a hidden shelter. Inside, the group came across other Chinese soldiers, badly wounded and covered in scars. Proudly, the boy said these men were saved by him and his father last year. The soldiers, however, were visibly frightened, unsure if Lin's group was an ally or an enemy. Lin noticed the men's accent matched this city's dialect. He lowered his weapon slightly, stating he didn't come to ask them to protect the royal family. He only wanted them to defend their own home. Meanwhile, the intruder group known as the Sand Wolves received word that more Chinese soldiers had arrived in the city. Their leader fired several shots into the air, demanding the villagers hand over the soldiers. He promised a reward, but no one dared to leave their homes. The same villager who had earlier slammed the door on Long was now hiding inside his house. The intruders tried to break down his door. The leader, a man with a tattoo on his neck, shouted that if no one revealed the soldiers' location, they would burn the entire village down. Unseen by the bandits, a long-range weapon was positioned quietly, aiming at them. The Sand Wolves had no idea they were already in the crosshairs. Believing they had the upper hand, they prepared to set fire to the residents' homes to force them to talk. Suddenly, one of the intruders was fatally shot in the head and dropped to the ground. His companions spun around, searching for the attacker. Lin appeared from the shadows and silently neutralized him. The Sand Wolves were caught completely off guard by the strength and precision of this soldier. The attack was so quiet that the remaining bandits continued threatening the villagers, unaware that death was stalking them from behind. Lin tossed a rock to draw one man's attention and mocked them, saying their alertness was truly astonishing. The attacker turned and fired wildly with both guns, but Lin overpowered him with ease. Lin coldly said that the man could never win with simple weapons. Shocked, the intruder realized too late that the one standing before him was the Supreme himself. The protagonist took him down and with his gun aimed at the man's head, told him to be more attentive when he meets him in the next life. A single shot ended him. Another intruder saw what happened and tried to hide, but was caught when he attempted to sneak up on Lin. Trembling, he knelt down and begged to be spared. Lin asked if he had spared the residents of the Northwest. The man stayed silent, and with that, he too was eliminated. The villager, who had been watching the scene through a crack in his door, saw the carnage unfold. Lin turned to him and ordered him to stay inside inside until every intruder was gone. The man obeyed and asked if China was really there to save them. Lin replied yes. Minutes later, reinforcements from the Sandwolves squad arrived, continuing their hunt. The protagonist positioned himself on top of a house to get a better view of the incoming enemies. At the perfect moment, he leaped down, firing both pistols, hitting several targets as others fled. From his window, the old man watched in awe as Lin fought alone against a swarm of men. The protagonist switched to hand-to-hand combat, neutralizing the intruders with devastating punches. The villager remembered the last time he had seen someone this strong. It was the man leading the Sandwolves. The commander of the reinforcement squad grew furious when he realized his men were terrified of a single Chinese soldier. He insulted them, calling them pathetic losers. But then fear gripped him when he noticed an eerie silence among his men. At that moment, Lin appeared behind him, having just eliminated the mercenary standing next to him. The man pointed his gun in panic, but Lin crushed the barrel with his bare hand. Two soldiers saw their boss struggling but chose to run, abandoning the fight to save their own lives. The rest of the squad followed, fleeing at full speed. The protagonist team waited from the top of a mountain, raining precise shots down on the intruders. In that tense moment, the enemy boss called Lin a coward for pointing a gun at an armed man. Lin stared at her coldly and asked if she really thought it was honorable when her group pointed weapons at the unarmed citizens of this country. For him, there was nothing heroic about throwing the people of China into misery to fight for every inch of land. The boss smirked, saying he wasn't wrong, and invited Lin to shoot if he wished. But she also made it clear that she held information on how to reach the headquarters and could use that to help him. At that moment, she removed her cap, revealing she was actually a woman. Their conversation was interrupted by Long, who reported to the Supreme that the mercenaries who escaped from Yinzhou City at Point A were surrounded and exterminated. He stopped speaking when he noticed the woman talking to Lin. Suddenly, she sneered, claiming her head hurt just seeing the Supreme trash, the puppet dragon master, and the little follower named Long. Clearly, she knew her enemies well. Long pointed his gun at her, demanding to know how she dared insult the Dragon Master and the Supreme. The woman tried to bargain for her life, proposing a deal. Her condition for revealing the headquarters location was her release. Lin replied coldly that he didn't make deals with people of unknown origin. She continued trying to intimidate him, acting as if she was someone he needed. Losing patience, Lin grabbed her by the neck with full force, lifting her off the ground. Struggling to breathe, she finally agreed to talk. Gasping, she said she could take him to Eaglehead Castle. Collapsing to the ground, she tried to catch her breath, muttering that she had heard the Supreme had awakened but never imagined he would regain his strength so quickly. Now she was truly worried about her life. Lin began assigning tasks. Long was to keep an eye on the girl, while Feng was tasked with organizing the troops in Eagle Point City. From now on, their objective was to protect this location as their only fortress. Feng agreed and immediately put the injured Chinese commander from earlier in charge of arranging the soldiers. Later that day, the girl walked with her hands tied as she provided information along the way. She explained that the Sandwolf squad patrolled twice a day and would send more soldiers if the first team failed to return. The protagonist interrupted, asking how far it was to Eaglehead Castle. She vaguely answered that they would reach it after climbing a few more sand dunes. Checking the map, Feng realized she was lying. They were actually moving in the opposite direction, heading toward the edge of the desert. Long pulled his gun, warning her not to play tricks because his patience had limits. The mercenary pretended to be misunderstood, claiming she was only trying to prevent Lin from fighting 10,000 men alone and that her intentions were to help. Before Lin could respond, a yellow car suddenly jumped over the dunes, landing in front of them and spraying sand everywhere. The protagonist asked the girl who these people were. She replied that they belonged to the Vultures patrol team, the most ruthless squad of the Eagle Head group, known for killing any Chinese they encountered. The enemies got out of the car, and their bald leader announced he would keep the girl while the others could choose what to do with the rest. Lin snatched the knife from his partner, and with a few swift movements, cut down the entire Vulture group. The girl froze in shock, witnessing the strongest battalion fall in just one move. The protagonist snapped her out of her thoughts when he returned the dagger to his partner. Speaking with a serious tone, he gave the woman one last chance to tell the truth. She finally admitted she could lead them to the castle, but warned that Eaglehead Castle was easy to defend and hard to attack. It had a 24-hour sensor recognition system and battlefield surveillance radar. Their concern now was whether the Sandwolves had already discovered their location. Feng said he had taken care of it, boasting that hacking the repeater and intercepting the surveillance video was simple. Long quickly praised his partner's intelligence. Lin told everyone to get in the car because they needed to move now. Minutes later, the stolen vehicle sped toward Eaglehead Castle. The mercenary warned they were getting close. At that moment, the car entered the crosshairs of a Vulture squad sniper. The shooter hesitated, recognizing his companion's vehicle, but on closer inspection realized the driver wasn't the bald leader. Lin had already noticed the sentries hiding nearby. At the right moment, he gave the order for Long to shoot. The soldier climbed onto the car's roof and took out the Vulture snipers one by one. Enemy bodies fell from the dunes, and others were run over by the speeding car. The mercenary warned that at this rate, they would become easy targets. Lin replied coldly that he never said they were going to sneak in. Some sentinels approached after hearing the noise, only to panic when Lin's car flew over their heads, leaving them in utter despair. The soldiers try to activate the warning alarm for intruders, but Long is faster and shoots at the buckets of gasoline nearby. Several explosions are triggered after this movement. The mercenary shouts that Eaglehead Castle also has many Chinese hostages, and Long may accidentally finish them off if he continues to act this way. The protagonist simply ignores the girl's warning and asks Feng how long it will take to break the enemy's defense system. The Dragon Master checks the device and confirms that there is little left. Suddenly, an aircraft appears above them and starts chasing their car. The mercenary screams that it is the armed reconnaissance aircraft of the Sandwolf Squadron, and they need to find a way to escape. Lin shouts that the direction is up to Long. He jumps while his partner takes control of the car. The soldiers on the aircraft are shocked when the protagonist leaps so high that he appears right at their window. A Vulcan cannon located underneath the aircraft activates, but Lin simply rips it out with his hand. A new explosion lights up the sky. Long laughs, saying only the boss can do this. The protagonist returns to the car and tells Long to accompany him. Meanwhile, inside the walls of Eaglehead Castle, the soldiers already know about the invaders and line up to defend themselves. But the gate collapses under the lightning sent by the ultimate. The protagonist's eyes turn red as his power activates. The stolen car smashes through the gates, allowing them to storm inside. In the sequence, many soldiers of the Vulture Squad are eliminated. Lin continues to exude insane power, so strong that the ground begins to crack beneath his feet. Suddenly, a hole bursts open in the stone wall. The head of Eaglehead Castle watches with a smile, asking who this man is. Lin spots a tank approaching, its cannon aimed at him. The soldiers of the castle cheer for the appearance of Chief Ding. A bomb is fired from the tank toward the protagonist. He dodges effortlessly and kicks the bomb back toward the soldiers of the castle. More men are eliminated in the blast, enraging the boss, who shouts at Lin not to underestimate him. The man tries to run the tank over the hero, but it fails. Lin grips the vehicle with his hands and sends electricity surging through it. Ding senses the overwhelming chi radiating from Lin, yet still feels confident. He fires another shell directly at the hero. Unexpectedly, Lin grabs the bomb with his bare hand, stopping it in the barrel. Another explosion erupts, but the protagonist remains unharmed. He calls Ding a sneaky rat before breaking into the castle. Inside, he finds the room where the hostages are held. A woman clutches her son, asking if he was sent by China to rescue them. Lin confirms and orders the hostages to follow him. Meanwhile, outside, the castle soldiers clash with the protagonist's team. Long drives through opponents with excitement, then jumps out of the car and drags the mercenary along. At that moment, someone shouts, "Sister Yibing!" The hostage freed by the protagonist runs and hugs the girl, saying he thought she was dead. The mercenary smiles with joy, realizing everything is fine with him. The little boy glares at Long, asking why he tied up his sister. The protagonist replies that it's simple. This beautiful girl is actually a demon who murders without hesitation. The boy screams that it's not true, saying the hostages would have been killed if not for Sister Yibing. He unties her himself, asking her to tell everyone she isn't a bad person. At that moment, other hostages join in, confirming the boy is right. They explain that many of them were traveling across the northwest border of China, but were trapped because of the battle. Fortunately, Yibing came to save them. The protagonist decides to free her after learning this. The mercenary says he can rest easy, because her hands have never been stained with the blood of the Chinese people. She confesses she is a secret agent sent into the Sandwolf Squad, responsible for delivering information to the Chinese army. During her mission, she discovered that the three main forces, Sandwolves, Ancient Snake, and Grizzly Bear, are competing with each other. In this situation, the best option is to retreat. Yibing suggests this, knowing Lin would never back down. She was right. Lin orders Long to take the hostages back to the city. The soldier worries about him, but the protagonist admits he will advance to retake China's lands. Long laughs, saying he will accompany him. Yibing insists on joining too, claiming she wants to reclaim the territory of China more than anyone. She argues that without someone familiar with the area, it's impossible to locate the ancient territory of the snakes. The protagonist initially resists, insisting someone must stay and protect the hostages, but both Long and Yibing plead their case. Lin finally decides the best approach is to organize supplies so they can all leave together. After solving immediate problems, the protagonist thinks about his wife and hopes she is safe. The scene shifts to Axon's property. Ching suggests that the protagonist's wife get some sleep because she has been awake since yesterday. Shin doesn't respond. The subordinate tries to convince her, saying the Supreme would not be happy if he knew how hard his love had been working for the new company. Shin only says she wants to help the country as everyone else is doing. Her research shows that after one of the partners completely separated from the Jian family, he founded a new company capable of competing with the Mei family. This information might not directly help the country, but Shin is sure that soon Binhai City will fall into chaos. Her eyes drift to a frame holding the family photo. Lin and Rui are the most important people in her life. The subordinate, touched by the scene, mentally promises the protagonist that she will help his wife stabilize the situation in Binhai City and will not disappoint him. Night falls quickly. The protagonist sets up camp, lying down while gazing at his wife's photo inside the pocket watch. He kisses the image, promising to return soon. The next day arrives and the hostages organize the last supplies. Luckily, they have enough food and protection to continue on their own. The old man thanks the protagonist for all his help and promises the hostages will be fine, allowing them to head to Eagle City safely. Lin is grateful. Hours later, the group reaches the most chaotic city in the northwest. The invaders have turned it into a mess. Yibing says there's no choice but to keep moving. Long looks at the boss, asking if they should proceed, but realizes the protagonist has already advanced ahead. He considers following, but notices Yibing and Feng standing still, staring at the map in disbelief. They realize they are standing in no man's land. Long asks what that means. Yibing replies that this area has no master and is the most complex place in the northwest because superpowers don't work here. At that moment, the protagonist suddenly stops flying and begins to fall. Long exclaims that it looks cool, but Yibing scolds him, saying they are in deep trouble. Lin keeps falling. Meanwhile, a girl is bathing in the pool of her building. Everything seems peaceful until the glass ceiling shatters and Lin crashes into the water in front of her. Her subordinate rushes to see what happened. The protagonist still doesn't understand why his supernatural power vanished. Soon, a gun is pointed at his head. The subordinate doesn't recognize him, but the girl in the pool does. She realizes it's the Supreme and wonders how he arrived in no man's land so quickly. The woman becomes intrigued by Lin and hugs him from behind, asking if he is willing to be her lover. The protagonist quickly replies that he is married. She yells at him not to reject her so easily. Determined to conquer him, she slides her hand between his legs. In an instant, Lin grips her hand tightly and warns he won't hesitate to destroy her. The subordinate asks for permission to shoot. The protagonist loses his temper and crushes the man's gun with his fist. The woman becomes even more interested in Lin. Even without his superpowers, he still demonstrates incredible strength and fighting skill. The muscular guy throws a huge punch, and they all have to run because of the smoke. The man feels too embarrassed to admit he's not strong enough to beat that guy, so he suggests they tie him up and sell him. The girl gets really mad at how dumb he is. How are they supposed to tie him up if they can't even beat him? She then says they need to come up with something to earn South Supreme's protection. The smoke never ends, and far back, a woman asks her man to bring her something to wear. That's when our protagonist bursts out of the smoke and charges at them. But the guy quickly raises his hands and tells him to wait. His master is getting dressed, and it's not polite to attack a lady at that moment. Unfortunately for us, she's now dressed, and she says she'll be taking the protagonist to join her, asking what he thinks about that. He replies that actually he's going to wipe out the sandwolves, and that includes her. But the woman responds, saying he'll definitely agree to her terms. Showing off her seductive body, she says she has something he really wants. And maybe, just maybe, she does. But not everything that shines is gold. Our protagonist starts to wonder, does this woman know his true identity? Is that her plan? To blackmail him? But the woman says that Supreme must have sensed the strange magnetic field on Earth, and that it could mess with special abilities. She explains that without his powers, Supreme would struggle, but the protagonist says that won't be an issue. Still, she keeps talking, saying there's some ancient, mysterious seal in the Earth's core, connected to the magnetic field. If he removes that seal, his powers won't be affected anymore. And to find that place, he has to fully trust and cooperate with her. She asks if he's willing to do that. Sensing the malice in her voice, he asks what her real intentions are. Someone shows up and interrupts. A guy points a gun and asks if he's the one who fired earlier. Turns out, the woman's soldier got captured, and we didn't even notice. The man calls our protagonist boss and says the others probably came because of the gunshots. He then asks how many of them came and which tribe they belong to. The guy says they're from the Sandwolves tribe. Our protagonist says they should leave now. The beautiful, seductive woman, with curves that defy physics, says they have the same goals, so they should cooperate. The guy with the gun blushes. His brain was somewhere else. The temptations are pretty obvious, but the girl suddenly pulls a weapon from her back and says they can't afford to be that careless. Of course, our protagonist isn't even fazed. For him, women are already deadly weapons, so what he's seeing now is just a deadly weapon, holding more deadly weapons. While they're talking, outside the building, other people with PNG quality AK-47s are approaching. The woman tells her friend to get into character, and for some reason, now the whole place is flooded. The men head to the back door to hide. Meanwhile, the invaders enter and see two beautiful women in perfect outfits. Instantly, they're hypnotized by the seductive vibe in the air. The woman asks if they want to join in on the fun. They all start taking off their clothes, thinking it's that kind of fun. They leap at the girls, but right then, the white-haired one ducks and pushes her friend underwater, too. That's when the hidden soldiers open fire, wiping out every man about to fulfill his deepest fantasy. They were tricked. The two sirens hidden underwater were completely safe. And once again, what bodies, what beautiful bodies. They rise from the water-filled trap. Too bad the smoke keeps ruining the view you actually wanted to enjoy. And yeah, it's still in the way. They don't even know each other. The woman says her name is Bingzi and asks the white-haired girl what her name is. She replies she's Yuli, leader of the ancient snakes. With a suspicious look, Bingzi asks what exactly she means by leader. They're clearly suspicious of each other. That's when our protagonist walks up and says it's all done. The man in the back asks if they can at least help carry the bodies. The pink-haired guy cheers, saying this victory was absolutely refreshing. The other guy, a real suck-up, takes the chance to praise his master, saying she worked really hard. But this ridiculous scene doesn't move our protagonist at all. He's just wondering what the real goal of the snake's leader is. Meanwhile, the story jumps to a new place. The woman is thanking the man for everything he's done. Without his help, things probably wouldn't have worked out. The man says she's being too kind. He was just doing his job. By the way, he hands her a list with the members of Binhai's political and business alliance. Looking over the papers, the blonde girl notices lots of names. Influential people involved in political movements. She questions why they're all from emerging powers. The man explains that she doesn't have enough resources to join the police and business alliance. She agrees and says she's truly grateful. Without help from many people, especially the Wang family, she would have never reached her current position, let alone become president. She thinks for a moment and ends up agreeing with the man's suggestion. Then she proposes they join forces with the emerging powers too. The man is even surprised by the girl's boldness. She continues, saying there's data about a distorted magnetic field that absorbs bloodline energy, and that's exactly what Shen Yan and his ritual are after. The man becomes uneasy with that info and says they found a traitor in the military who had been studying the meteorite, but in the blink of an eye, his tone shifts. He says that just proves how valuable the meteorite really is. The girl agrees and tells him to use the lab as a front to attract more investment. She also asks him to form a new team and expand operations once the Northwest is stabilized. They agree and move on to other topics. Once again, the man praises the girl, saying she made an excellent choice. Another woman also congratulates Miss Zhang. She smiles, deep in thought, remembering something she heard, that the husband handles outside matters, and the wife, the internal ones. She wonders if she's doing a good job in her role. Later that night, in Binhai's banquet hall, everyone's in celebration mode. A man calls for everyone's attention to give a congratulatory speech. He announces the arrival of President Jiang Shihui. She walks in wearing a stunning dress that shows off her incredible curves. She grabs the mic and thanks everyone for coming and for their support. On behalf of the entire group, she offers her congratulations. The party goes on, and everyone starts chatting and greeting each other. Meanwhile, the girl in the white cloak stays quiet, reflecting to herself. She makes a promise to protect everyone, no matter the cost. We then return to our protagonist group. They're surrounded by rubble. The guy with the braided hair is getting bandaged. He's hurt. The girl jokes that, despite looking tough, he's super sensitive to pain. Acting like a little kid, he says he didn't expect the grass there to be that poisonous. Another girl is just done with him. She only asked him to clear the area, and somehow he gets cut by grass and poisoned. That's just ridiculous. The man apologizes, but clearly isn't taking it seriously, because right now, he's looking at an amazing sight. Too bad that damn white smoke is in our way too, but not for long. The smoke clears. The woman asks where the exit is. She could help since she knows the place really well, but yeah, the tension between them is real. She says the other woman should find her own way out. While they argue over nonsense, the protagonist just stands there, silently watching the whole ridiculous mess. Then, frustrated, the white-haired woman orders her guards to beat the other girl. The guy hesitates. He's thinking he can't do that. There's no way he'd lay a hand on such soft and beautiful skin. His leader, of course, loses it, so now he's betraying his loyalty. Over something that shallow? Meanwhile, the girl who was supposed to be beaten just keeps laughing, finding the whole scene amusing. It's hilarious how that woman tries to give orders with such clumsy men. As she watches, the pink-haired guy walks over and asks if she's laughing at something. They look together, and yeah, it really is funny. The woman is complaining that being ugly isn't a problem, but being ugly and disloyal? Now that's just unacceptable. The guy, trying to defend himself, says he may be ugly and disloyal, but at least he's humble, so he's got that going for him. Finally, our protagonist has had enough and cuts off the nonsense. He says that's enough. Everyone needs to focus on the same goal. Trivial matters shouldn't even be on the table. That alpha attitude leaves the girl super impressed. She praises him and asks what he plans to do. The protagonist's friend comments that he's insanely powerful. Supreme Ling truly lives up to the name, but he has zero compassion. Meanwhile, the girl in the back is annoyed by his attitude, thinking that humans are complicated and irritating. irritating. A bird flies through the sky, which honestly means nothing to us, but the crew arrives at a new location by car. They say they're getting close to the ancient snake's territory. The pink-haired guy raises his gun and says that bird flying overhead is getting on his nerves. According to him, they should feast on its meat. But the other guy tries to be reasonable, says you can't just eat anything out there. What if the thing's diseased? Of course, that doesn't stop the guy from firing. The bird gets hit, and it's not just any bird, it's a vulture. A drop of blood lands on the pink-haired guy's head, but the bird doesn't fall. He wonders if he missed the shot, but he's sure he didn't. Looking closer, he realizes he did hit something, but not the bird. He shot the hand the vulture was carrying. Still, he's not discouraged. He says now he's gonna take it down for real. He lines up another shot, but someone interrupts. The annoyed girl is activating her powers. She focuses, ready to strike. But once again, that damn white smoke ruins the moment for everyone. She was just about to attack, when suddenly, a loud sound stuns everyone. The bird crashes from the sky, landing right at their feet. And the one who brought it down? It's him, our protagonist. One shot, no mistakes. They go check what that hand in the bird's beak was all about. The woman watching thinks something is definitely off. She notes that stuff like this doesn't usually happen in ancient snake territory. The protagonist walks over and comments that these people sure have a weird way of welcoming visitors, then asks what she's holding. She replies that it's the double serpent scepter, a sacred item from the ancient snakes that should control animals, but apparently had zero effect on that vulture. But our protagonist isn't even interested in the bird. He's focused on this, the human arm. Why would a vulture be carrying a severed human arm? Where did it come from? The guy with glasses steps in and asks to examine the arm. He says the blood's still fresh, meaning the owner could still be alive, or at least didn't die that long ago. Judging by the skin tone and texture, the arm likely belonged to someone from the old snake tribe. The woman is shocked. She hadn't realized it came from one of her own people. At that moment, a gust of wind draws their attention toward the village. She wonders, could the enemy have already launched an attack? Then we cut to a different scene, the central gymnasium of Binhai City. Someone's analyzing a map with the positions of families in the east, west, and north. With war spreading and scouts on the move, spies could be anywhere. They need to act fast before the army advances. There's fear that scouts, maybe even soldiers, have already infiltrated Binhai. The woman shouts, asking if the black armored army is ready to protect Supreme Lee's family. The soldiers pause for a second, then shout in unison that they are. She says she's proud of their spirit. A man with an eye patch steps up with urgent news. He says the Azure Dragon is already positioning special forces across the 8 main streets of Binhai. The woman gets mad and asks if he's stupid for yelling classified info like that, but since the damage is done, she tells him to point out exactly where on the map they're stationed. The man awkwardly scratches his shoulder and says he'll do that right away. He steps up and says the Azure Dragon is wherever he was thinking, but the truth is, he forgot. After thinking for a bit, he points to Honglong Street, then reconsiders and says maybe it's the Lu Feng Clinic. Ching stays alert because the Lu Feng Clinic is where Rui and Dr. Li are. Without hesitation, she decides to check every place showing strange movement on the map and tells the officer to go with her. The subordinate has a bad feeling, believing that some enemy already knew she would place special soldiers to spy on the center of Binhai. If she is right, the enemy has likely gone ahead. As they walk through the streets, Ching asks where the people he planted are. The man points to the corner. They continue moving, and the subordinate questions whether the officer used a car or came on foot. Azure just says she will know when they arrive. Ching suspects there is a traitor in the Black Armor Army. The officer is not very smart, but she cannot think of any other traitor besides him. Years ago, Azure was often beaten for stealing. He was never satisfied, even after joining the Black Armor Army to make a living. Ching feels like finishing this guy now, but she hesitates because of Azure's superior. She decides to wait and maybe lure him to her territory. Soon, Ching meets the special forces that the officer planted. Suddenly, she attacks and neutralizes the 2 men. One of the possible spies accuses Azure of lying to them. At that moment, the man takes control of his clothes and presses a button, saying it's time to start. Ching is surrounded by several cars. Using her spy trampoline, she jumps into the air and asks what kind of mediocre trap this is. Her goal is to finish the traitor first, but his allies drive at full speed, trying to hit her. Ching kicks the cars away with her super strength, then focuses on the traitor. She is shocked when her kick is blocked. Landing on the ground, the soldier asks if she forgot that the squad's armor is reinforced. Azure mocks her, saying the parking lot is not random. At that moment, his allies accelerate toward her again. The soldier is sure of his victory, but in the next moment, he and his allies are controlled by a supernatural power. Even Ching starts to float. It is Rui using her lineage power. The subordinate is delighted to realize it is the little princess's strength. The traitor's mistake was luring Ching to a parking lot near the clinic, where the protagonist's daughter was staying. Dr. Lee gives a thumbs up, praising the girl. Rui screams that she missed Qing. The subordinate gently touches the little princess's face and says she was amazing. The doctor laughs, saying those traitors never imagined the girl's power. Rui says she tried hard to stay strong and protect her family. At that moment, the protagonist's wife runs to her daughter with a smile. Shin was called by Qing the moment Rui used her supernatural powers. They hug, and the mother bombards her with questions, wanting to know if Rui ate well during her cultivation and if she obeyed Master Li's orders. The man confesses that Rui obeyed to a certain extent. Qing quickly changes the subject, congratulating the protagonist's wife for the success of their political and business alliance. Shin admits she needed to talk about that. Her sad expression reveals that things are not going well. She confesses it is harder than she imagined, but is willing to overcome all barriers for her family. Rui hears this and immediately asks where her father is. Shin promises they will see him soon. Meanwhile, Qing steps away, feeling lost as she didn't expect a traitor inside the Black Armor army. Still, she is determined to protect the protagonist's family until he returns. Later, Azure is brought tied up to the office. Qing forces him to tell the truth. The man says he has no family or friends, so the only thing she can threaten is his life. Qing brings the blade close to his neck and says it's fine if he doesn't want to talk. She takes the controller the traitor was hiding in his mouth, breaks it, and finds a card with information about the person who ordered Azure to betray the army. The officer finally speaks, saying the only one who can compete with Qing is the White Tiger. The subordinate finds it impossible that the traitor is a White Tiger envoy. The man just says the real White Tiger envoy is in the northwest. The scene shifts to the protagonist's team. They approach a civilization belonging to the Snake tribe. Long knocks on the door of a villager to check if anyone is inside. Suddenly, a gun falls from the door with the force of his knock. At that moment, something catches Yibing's attention, and she runs toward it. Long asks what she saw. The girl tells him not to touch it and points to a lizard on the ground. Long asks about the strange twinkle in the beast's eyes. Lin interrupts, picking up the fallen gun, and says they should focus on the house because there might be a corpse inside. He prepares to enter, but Yibing suggests surrounding and investigating first. The protagonist tells her that poor performance and drama only make things obvious, so they enter now. Long notices Yibing looks uncomfortable and asks what she's hiding. Suddenly, an explosion bursts through the opening where the lizard entered. Now they know someone is on the other side of the wall. Long thinks it's better to follow Yibing's suggestion and leave the house. The mercenary runs first, but is stopped by the subordinate of the Snake tribe leader. Lin uses his lightning power, placing his hand in the opening. The wall breaks, revealing a corpse covered in scales. Nurba carefully examines the man. He belongs to her tribe. For some reason, the protagonist believes this man is the same lizard that entered the opening. The idea makes sense to everyone. Nurba accuses Yibing of turning her tribe members into lizards. Long restrains the mercenary, threatening her if she doesn't tell the truth. Nurba bids farewell to her tribesmen, while the Snake tribe members look shaken. Yibing gives a scary, satisfied smile. Suddenly, the corpse swells, blisters forming on his skin, and explodes in front of everyone. The protagonist's team is shocked. Meanwhile, the tribe leader threatens to finish off Yibing. Long still holds her to prevent escape. Nurba decides not to wait and charges with her staff. The mercenary knees Long to free herself, then pulls a hidden gun and points it at Nurba. At the same time, Lin and Feng aim their pistols at her. The protagonist advises her not to act rashly. She agrees and throws the gun to the ground. The hero asks everyone not to attack Yibing and lets her speak. The mercenary confesses she did all this. She is a White Tiger envoy and a double agent. The northwest border has been the scene of constant fights between the Sandwolves, the Snake tribe, and other clans. Yibing adds that ordinary people like her are the ones truly harmed by this conflict. She admits she once thought it was all over, until the White Tiger appeared, saved her, and rescued her village. From that day, she became his subordinate. He asked her to disguise herself among the Sandwolves until Lin appeared. It turns out the White Tiger is the real leader of the Sandwolves, aiming not only to control the Northwest, but also to find the protagonist. Lin stays silent. Yibing turns to Nurba, saying the Snake tribe burned and stole her village, so she fought back. Nurba admits she made mistakes in the past and regrets them, but Long argues that Yibing has no reason to act like this, and threatens to fire all his ammo at her. The protagonist asks his friend to let the girl speak. The mercenary pushes Long away, telling him to obey the chief. Yibing then reveals the locations of other Snake tribe members as a reward for Lin's willingness to hear her story. She snaps her fingers, revealing bodies tied to the ceiling. The hero understands all these people were eliminated by the ally she protected. Feng is curious about how she turns people into lizards. Yibing explains she uses a potion given by the White Tiger Lord. Nurba accuses her of cruelty, but Yibing says it's exciting to watch people writhe until they transform into animals. She adds that killing the clan leaders was even more thrilling. Lin can't believe he didn't notice this woman's disguise. Even the Supreme hadn't suspected her. He understands she allied herself with the traitor. But Yibing screams that it was the White Tiger who brought order to the northwest, so no one has the right to insult him, especially Lin. She recalls when her village was destroyed. She walked with wounds all over her body until reaching a civilization where the sandwolves were. Some men tried to harm her, but the White Tiger appeared and protected her. Yibing admits she had always felt ignored. But on that day, the White Tiger called her by name. That's why she can't accept being seen as the villain. The leader of the snakes was the first to destroy her people and wipe out her entire family. Everything she has done so far was to ensure that the names of important people were not forgotten. Yibing accuses the protagonist of not saving them when chaos took over the northwest. She shouts that he closed his eyes to the people. Feng notices that Lin is losing his temper as the power of the Supreme leaks out of his body. His anger erupts, and his lightning destroys everything around them. The soldier keeps the traitor in his sights and asks if he should shoot. Yibing says they should shoot her because the curse of transformation is linked to the White Tiger Lord. Now that he has discovered her location, escape is impossible. At that moment, several manipulated birds fly overhead. Norba grows concerned, realizing these birds are following Yibing's instructions. She fears that the power of her staff has been blocked by the White Tiger. Lin radiates a murderous aura as he orders his allies to be ready for any enemy. The attack against the birds begins. Long uses his weapon while Lin unleashes his powerful lightning. The number of enemies is overwhelming, and Long decides the only solution is to eliminate Yibing. She argues it won't work, warning that without negotiation with the White Tiger, they are doomed. She calls him a fool for not realizing what triggers the trap. Tired, she walks away, but Long fires toward her face. Feng redirects the bullet upward, saying things can be resolved through words. Lin, however, believes the monsters will keep coming as long as the magic matrix exists. He soars above the clouds where the birds fly and activates his lightning power. The monsters are obliterated, feathers raining everywhere. Long praises his boss's talent, but Yibing insists it won't work, explaining that this trap in snake territory was specially prepared. The team fights with all their might, but Yibing says Lin still doesn't understand the complexity of the Northwest. Distracted by her words, Feng is warned by the soldier to focus. Suddenly, a red-eyed bird pierces Long's neck with its beak. Feng screams, thinking the worst, but the soldier grabs the bird and kills it. Then more birds attack, splattering red liquid everywhere. Long is hit in the back, yet continues fighting. He declares that even if born again, he would still choose to be a Chinese soldier. Finally, he collapses. Feng tries to help but is stopped by Nurba, who warns him not to sacrifice himself. Lin keeps cutting through the birds. Soon, a signal comes through his communication device. On the other end, someone reports they finally made contact. The message, Shin and the little princess have been kidnapped. Lin is momentarily distracted, and the mercenary uses the chance to cover him in black magic. She mentally states that her mission is complete. Meanwhile, Qing reports that Wang was murdered. Dr. Li is severely injured, and the lab built by the Supreme's wife was destroyed. All meteorite iron research vanished. She surrounded the city to protect the girls, but learned White Tiger's people are everywhere. Qing kneels, apologizing for failing. Lin, consumed by the black magic circle, tells her to keep protecting his family. His rage is so great that his energy shatters the black magic. He screams, demanding how the sandwolves dared to touch his family. A super powerful lightning bolt strikes Yibing, reducing her to a skeleton in seconds. Nurba stares in shock at the Supreme's power, wondering why he didn't use it earlier. Feng understands from his anger that the White Tiger has crossed the line. Lin realizes the battle in the northwest was orchestrated by Baihu from the start. He was meant to be distracted sweeping the sandwolves, then lured to no man's land to destroy the snake tribe, giving them a chance to attack Binhai. Holding Long's body, Lin blames himself for inviting his friend to this mission. He asks Nurba for permission to bury him with the rights of the snake tribe. Feng regrets the loss of both Long and Nurba's subordinate, who died fighting Yibing. The cloud of smoke dissipates. Lin warns Nurba that the meteorite controlling the ancient snake territory has been destroyed, and now supernatural powers work again in no man's land. He concludes that meteorite iron is the key to the northwest. The White Tiger will use his army and territory to seize it. Though not fully recovered, Lin vows to do anything to save Yixin and Rui. The three survivors get in the car, and he drives at full speed. Nurba asks if the White Tiger is one of his subordinates, feeling betrayed. Lin replies that her influence in the Chinese army ended years ago. There were once 4 powerful soldiers, Zilong, Baihu, Shang, and Xuanwu. They now conserve their forces in different places. Zilong was always by his side. He thought the White Tiger stayed in the west, but months ago he learned the man moved to the northwest border. Feng admits he once believed the Supreme and the White Tiger would get along because they are both orphans. He jokes that maybe the man is just obsessed with cultivating his will. Nurba dislikes the joke and vows to finish the White Tiger, whether he cultivates or not. Lin suspects the White Tiger's rebellion is tied to Shen Yan. The scene shifts to a beautiful waterfall. Feng was right. The White Tiger is focused on cultivating, cutting the water effortlessly. A messenger interrupts, reporting that Yibing completed her mission but was murdered. He asks if she will be honored as a martyr. The White Tiger smashes the rock beneath him and coldly asks who she is. The messenger, trembling, says she was the girl planted in the Sandwolf squad. The White Tiger orders him to fetch the sergeants. Back in Northwest civilization, Feng loads the last supplies. This time, he travels alone with the Snake Tribe leader. He asks if Nurba is sure about not joining him in meteorite space. The girl remains undecided, mourning her fallen subordinate. The scene shifts to Binhai City. The protagonist has no choice but to return and save his family. He learns from his subordinate that Azure set up an ambush in the parking lot. Qing pretended to fall into the trap to capture the mastermind behind the betrayal. During this, the little princess used her electromagnetic force to control Azure's direction, drawing the White Tiger's attention. The rebels working for the White Tiger surrounded everyone. Rui tried to use her powers again, but the rebels used meteorites to absorb energy and kidnap them. Dr. Li was injured protecting them. Qing kneels, asking for punishment. Lin says she is not to blame. This was the White Tiger's long-prepared plan. He asks if she knows where his wife and daughter are. She replies no. Lin orders her to find them today. He fears the White Tiger in the northwest and Shen Yan in the capital may join forces. Qing explains that her investigation shows no contact between Baihu and Shen Yan yet. Suddenly, a roar interrupts the conversation. Qing looks back and sees wolves approaching, wild and ready to bite anyone. The protagonist doesn't move. On the other hand, the girl is prepared to protect him. This makes Lin have an idea. Instead of dealing with two enemies, it is better to disperse his forces and use Shenyan's power to contain the White Tiger. At this moment, the protagonist wastes no time and tells Qing to go after his wife and daughter. In the blink of an eye, the girl simply disappears into thin air. Now the protagonist says he will put an end to the wild dogs. The scene changes to the royal palace. Shenyan receives the news that Lin has returned to Binhai City. The Dragon Lord wonders what the Supreme may be planning. The servant says that Baihu took advantage of the Supreme's trip to the northwest to suppress the rebellion and capture his wife and daughter, so he assumes that Lin has returned to save them. Shenyan laughs, asking how Baihu managed to capture someone from Qing, but soon his mood changes when he realizes that maybe this action of Baihu is because he wants to occupy the city of Binhai. The servant gives more information that makes Shenyan drop his glass of wine. His spy said that the Black Armor army was totally controlled by the White Tiger. Suddenly, the Dragon Lord screams, asking if the subordinate knows what Baihu is ready to do. The servant replies that no one knows the purpose of kidnapping Lin's wife and daughter, but it seems that he took the girls to that place. Shenyan feels that in a while no one will be able to stop these men, especially the White Tiger that took over the protagonist's squad. It seems that not even the Supreme is being taken seriously. The servant says that now Lin only has Qing by his side. Shenyan wonders if it is possible to defeat them with a wave of his hand. Meanwhile, outside the palace, the hero has the entrance blocked. The guards realize who he is after feeling a dark energy spread. Lin doesn't hear the men and enters the castle. Shenyan was already expecting this and said he could enter the room. The protagonist sits comfortably in the chair while the Dragon Lord comments that it's been a while since they saw each other in person. Lin refers to Shenyan as the young emperor and says that maybe he already knows the reason for his presence here today. He is direct and says that he came to borrow his troops, but it will not be in vain. The protagonist says that after the soldiers help recover his family, he will dedicate himself to pacifying the Northwest and stabilizing the situation in the Imperial Kingdom. Shenyan asks if the Supreme is in a hurry. Lin replies that the forces in various districts are ready to act and may not be able to wait any longer. It would be bad, especially for Shenyan, because his position would be in danger. The Dragon Lord realizes that even without a wife and without a daughter, the protagonist remains rampant. Without wasting time, he agrees to lend his troops, but the front barrage is his electromagnetic force. Lin says he understands what he means. Shenyan is talking about the ultimate sacrifice. He decides that he will inform about the electromagnetic force when the time comes. So he takes the royal family badge and gives it to the protagonist. Lin says goodbye and leaves the palace for Shenyan. No matter how powerful a person is, he can become a puppet when he has worries. On ordinary days, the Supreme would never ask for help from his enemy. A few minutes later, the hero gets a car and receives the news that his wife and daughter have been located. They are in the green space to study exotic matter. King says that he has already checked, and the security around the building does not seem to be strict, so it is possible that this is a trap of Baihu. Lin replies that this little trick can't hold him back. He leaves her in charge to organize the soldiers and send them to the lab. The scene changes to Rui in an analysis tube. Baihu is surprised that her electromagnetic force has not reacted. He assumes that it is because Rui is very young, and her electromagnetic energy has not yet been fully developed. At that moment, Baihu finds out that the protagonist has returned to Binhai City and is heading towards him. The guy is surprised that the Supreme has come back so fast, and soon calls the ally. On the other end of the line, the White Tiger asks to transfer Lin as a hostage. Baihu asks if the trap is already ready, and the servant replies, yes. Suddenly, a noise on top of the ceiling draws their attention. The two look up, asking what is happening. Suddenly, one of the servants, in the midst of desperate smoke from his head, warns the Lord that the building has been surrounded by the envoys of the Dragon Lord. They blew up the entrance and are about to attack. Baihu still thinks he has the upper hand because he has the daughter and wife of the Supreme. Meanwhile, outside, the soldiers of the Dragon Lord attack precisely. They report that the enemies in Area A have been eliminated, and now it remains to break down the gate. In a few seconds, the soldiers manage to do this. The protagonist is advised to enter because King informed that the laboratory was after this wall. The hero agrees, and when he enters, he sends the rays to the enemies who were formerly part of his squad. The protagonist also uses hand-to-hand combat. He accuses his opponents of betraying their brothers and their country, and now they still dare to draw the sword against their former leader. The soldier neutralized by the protagonist replies that he is just following his orders. The Supreme stops beating when he hears this. He walks away and then asks if the soldier is still willing to fight him. The man just warns that Shin and the little princess are in the lab opposite. Shenyan's soldiers think it might be a trap, but the protagonist believes it will just be another cheap trick. He puts his hand on the scanner, and the door opens, allowing his entrance. Lin's soldiers stay alert because the room is filled with fog. Suddenly, the door closes behind them. A silhouette appears in the darkness. The protagonist's attention immediately turns to his wife and daughter, who are unconscious and trapped in a machine. Baihu spreads his arms and says he is happy to see the Supreme appear. The protagonist screams, trying to wake his family. Rage fills him as he attacks Baihu with lightning, but the man easily dodges and mocks that the Supreme is too weak. Lin keeps attacking, refusing to back down. Suddenly, a portal opens beside him. Baihu admits he didn't expect the Supreme to use electromagnetic force, even under the meteorite's suppression. Maybe it's because he is the key. The protagonist wonders what nonsense he is talking about, but soon realizes that Baihu has obtained the meteorite. The enemy laughs, declaring that not only the meteorite iron, but soon the entire world will belong to the White Tiger Lord. At that moment, he pulls something from his suit pocket and throws it on the ground. A purple cloud of smoke fills the room, blocking the protagonist's vision. He quickly realizes it's poisonous mist and orders his soldiers to cover their noses. He feels disappointed with Baihu's actions because they were once as close as master and servant, but that no longer matters. He manages to recover his family. Later that day, his wife and daughter are taken to the hospital. Fortunately, Dr. Lee is already recovered and takes care of Shin and Rui, so the protagonist has nothing to worry about as they will soon wake up. At that moment, Chin brings information to the Supreme. She warns that the Black Armor Army is completely controlled, but Baihu has escaped. Lin asks if she knows where the meteorite came from. The servant reports that it was brought from the territory of snakes, and that the insulated laboratory studied ways to control electromagnetic force. Suddenly, the protagonist punches the wall, leaving it crumpled. Today, he realizes that Baihu is just a puppet of the White Tiger. For Lin, it's clear that the White Tiger's ambition is growing. He even dared to involve Shin and Rui in this mess. It's possible Baihu will hold strong now that he controls the Black Armor Army's military power, but it won't last long. As the conversation continues, they plan how to locate the White Tiger. Suddenly, the protagonist's wife wakes up, and he is startled. Shin hugs the Supreme, relieved, saying he is finally back. Lin hugs her back and apologizes for the delay. They talk for a while. She feels no difference in her body and realizes the protagonist is unharmed. At that moment, their daughter enters the room. Both parents look at her with joy. Shin feels relief while the Supreme turns to his wife, telling her he missed her very much. He doesn't hide his concern about protecting his family and explains that's why he needs to leave. Stroking her hand, he promises that once he gets rid of Shenyan and Baihu, they will live happily together forever. His wife wishes him good luck, saying she believes in him. Rui proudly says her father will be the winner. An aircraft lands on the hospital roof to take Lin. His goal is clear: break the iron meteorite and bring peace to China. Qing asks if Shin and the princess were taken safely to the secure location. Lin confirms and reminds her that Rui's electromagnetic force has attracted countless enemies, so she must stay and command the protection of his family. He tells her that once everything is resolved, she should meet him in the northwest. The scene shifts to the northwest. Members of the Sandwolf squad celebrate after capturing a beautiful woman. Nurba is surrounded by those vile men. Before she can react, a bullet pierces her shoulder, and she collapses unconscious. The mercenaries debate what to do. One of them, holding Nurba's staff, suggests tying her up and taking her to the leader. As they prepare to leave, a sword falls from the sky, destroying their car. They turn toward the source but see no one. Suddenly, A man clad in reinforced armor retrieves the sword. The mercenaries open fire, but the hooded warrior wields the blade so fiercely that flames burst from it. In moments, several mercenaries are cut down, while others flee and hide behind rocks, only to be hunted down. The armored man notices some soldiers escaping with the remaining vehicle, but chooses not to pursue. He grabs one of the mercenaries who stayed behind, demanding to know what happened to the Snake Tribe's territory. Trembling, the man reveals that the White Tiger destroyed it and stole supplies. The armored warrior presses further, asking why they captured Nurba. The mercenary stammers, nearly struck by the sword, and blurts out that they had no real intention. They just found her and abandoned her staff. The warrior takes a deep, angry breath and walks away. Meanwhile, at China's central training base, Qin brings Shin into the facility, explaining it's the safest place in the entire country and also where the Supreme trained his troops. Qin asks if this was ordered by Lin. The subordinate confirms, adding that Shin doesn't need to worry because they are safe with Xiao Ying, a former right-hand man of Lin and an expert in electromagnetic force. Relieved, Shin says she trusts him, but wishes she could do something more for her husband. At that moment, the subordinate remembers something and asks if she recalls the necklace her father gave to Rui. She replies that she never managed to decipher that relic. Qin suggests asking Xiao Ying, as he might understand its secrets. Shin agrees, calling it a great idea. The scene changes to the next day in the Snake Tribe's territory. The armored man cooks lunch, boiling a snake in a pot. Voices echo nearby. The protagonist walks alongside a local villager. The old man tells the Supreme he hasn't seen his friend since he left the Northwest, and that the Sandwolf squad has remained quiet since then. He adds that yesterday, a tall, strong man with a fierce gaze descended from the sky, slept in the square with a huge sword, and did nothing. The villager points him out. Lin approaches Xuanwu, saying it's been a long time since they met. Xuanwu removes his helmet, explaining that he cut ties with Baihu long ago. Recently, the traitorous leader instigated the Black Armor Army to rebel, and now they hunt him. Xuanwu says he has been searching for Lin since hearing of his awakening. The protagonist asks about Suzaku, and silence follows. The villager offers water, then asks why Master Xuanwu carries the staff of the Snake Tribe leader. The armored warrior replies that he recovered it when he arrived, and found soldiers attempting to capture Nirba. Lin warns his friend that Nirba, the staff, and the meteorite are closely connected. The White Tiger likely needs all three to advance his plan. Xuanwu agrees, saying it's unlikely to cross the meteorite without Nirba. The scene shifts to the Sandwolf territory. Nirba hangs from a wooden cross, watched by mercenaries. The protagonist knows it's a trap, but refuses to retreat. Xuanwu receives the order and falls from the sky, crashing among the mercenaries. The landing sends men flying, triggering their trap. Bombs rain down on Xuanwu. Lin yells for his partner to back off. A silhouette appears atop the Sandwolf castle. A man mocks the protagonist, asking if he really thought he could just break in. He points to the side, showing hostages the protagonist once saved now being threatened again. The retired soldier shoots one of them and warns the Supreme not to approach. Lin ignores the warning, anger rising. The old soldier casts a sand mist masking their movements. The protagonist realizes they are using the sandstorm to compensate for the power outage. He shouts that he will handle the situation while his partner rescues the hostages. Xuanwu grips his sword and charges forward. Bombs rain from the castle, but he leaps through the flames. The castle's forces intensify, the ground trembling. The protagonist warns his friend not to overdo it. Xuanwu stabilizes the stone platform holding the hostages, buying time for Lin to save them. The plan works, but the old soldier still has a trick left. Suddenly, the ground beneath the Supreme collapses. The real trap is an underground crusher. The old soldier escapes in an airship as Lin is swallowed by sand. Struggling, he's pulled down until something in the sky catches his eye. Huge birds swoop down, lifting him from the crusher. They are controlled by Nirba. Enjoying the story so far? Hit that like button and drop a comment to let me know what you think about this manhwa.